right. Settle down. BYK, you've missed some episodes. You'll have to go back, I think, on episode 82 or 83. I go over Technocracy and what it is. I'll do a brief explanation, too, before we start. So don't worry. I gotcha. I'll do a brief explanation. What's up, Dota? What's up, D? Guys, I'm tired. I'm a god on YouTube. How you doing, brother? How you doing, brother? I mean, don't. I don't. If you like feminism, that's fine. But you're, unfortunately, you're among a group of people who have found no evidence for the benefits of feminism and very much evidence for the negatives of it. However, we can leave that at bay. You don't actually need to have an opinion on feminism. You can literally just forget about any opinion you have on feminism for what I'm doing here. That's kind of why I do what I do. When it comes to the realm that I stick to, the ideology, what I point to is that the tech industry has become ideological, and it's almost regardless of ideology that it doesn't belong here. It doesn't matter what your ideology is. Okay. So you can leave it aside. You can agree with feminism. You can disagree with feminism. That's fine. I hope that I do a well enough job that I can talk about why just ideological things just don't belong in the tech industry. I cover feminism today because it ties in directly with the entire technocratic movement. So, first of all, I hope you're all having a great weekend. Let's start there, shall we? I hope you're all having a great weekend. It's good to see everybody. You guys are awesome. Thank you for being here. Whether you agree or disagree, I'm hoping that I cover this topic well enough. Second of all, I have my coffee. Oh, there's the ambulance. Okay. I have my coffee. I'm ready to go. I hope you're having a good weekend, and we'll get into this now. If you do not know what technocracy is, I will give you a brief overview. Somewhere between episodes 82 and 84, I titled them with the word technocracy so that it's easy to find them. You can always go on my YouTube. If you go on my YouTube and you look at the live tab, then you will be able to go back to those episodes and get a full in-depth overview of what technocracy is. So the brief overview, let me get my camera ready, and then we'll jump into what I mean by technocratic feminism. So as a precursor, the entire premise of what I do on stream here with the Enlightened Programming streams and with the Daily Tech News is to go over how the technological landscape, programming in particular, has been infected by ideologies. In modern day, it's mostly leftist ideologies. That includes feminism. And unfortunately, for all the people who would love to inject their ideology into programming, programming doesn't care about your ideology. In fact, what programming does care about is running efficiently and performantly and securely and solving problems for humans. That's it. You could be left, right, you could be up, down. I don't care. The code that executes on hardware does not care. It's a very fundamental premise. However, the reason why I go over technocracy in particular is because there is there is a long history of ideology infecting this field. All kinds of ideology, by the way. And this ideology then seeps into how you build things and why you build things. So for example, one thing we went over is the Unreal Engine programming guidelines, and how Unreal Engine has coding standards such as do not use terms like blacklist or whitelist. Or we've gone over the GitHub branch renaming from main to master because the word master has, slavery type, historical context, and so on and so forth. We've covered a ton of these. You're welcome to go back. I'm not going to go over them in full length. That's why I do these streams, and that's why these things are long, so that you can always go back and go over this material yourself, in case you don't believe me, or you don't agree with my information. You can always find it in the past. Now, the problem with ideology inside of programming is that when you start trying to make programmers or machines or hardware bent on ideological leanings, you necessarily lose the focus. So that's why I do cybersecurity articles, for example. We have neutered the ability for programmers to even understand what simple security paradigms they should implement. We lean on obfuscations and abstractions, which is what ideological groups do. They obfuscate and abstract. Not always, and sometimes for good reason, but usually not for good reason. And the reason why is because they want you to feel instead of think. This is bad when it comes to programming, when it comes to code, and when it comes to machines. And we see this play out. If I'm right, then we should see this be able to play out in the real world when it comes to things like, well, are things getting worse? Is the tech industry basically just becoming shittier and shittier? Why, yes, it is. Websites are becoming worse and less secure. We went over the T app yesterday. Again, regardless of what you think about toxic masculinity or feminism or whatever, does not matter. That app got exposed because of a cloud bucket that didn't have basic security configuration. The idea behind things like React and Rust for your safety, and all of these paradigms that kind of sweep under the rug exactly how code works against your machine. These are all mechanisms upon which to extract you from the natural reality of things, and then infect you with an ideology that you can apply in the abstraction. And it leads to the enshittification of everything. This has been happening for a long time. So, what then is technocracy? I will give you the notes. Whoops! Sorry. My bad. This is an AI-generated paper that got peer-reviewed and published. My bad. It got peer-reviewed and published, and I have this thing up all the time, and I just keep forgetting to take it down. I apologize. But you can see here, this is the state of AI, with DCK as a dick, and then the rat, and then the testom cells. I'm sorry, my bad. Now, the reason why I have this thing up, because it is a constant daily reminder of the ultimate abstraction machine. It's the ultimate obfuscation machine. The tech industry knows that they have royally fucked up. They have made bad decision after bad decision, and I speak of them as a whole, although in part there are individuals who are extremely smart and they know better. We have lots of smart programmers, for example, etc. You out there, if you're watching this right now, I may not be specifically talking about you, but you as a consumer should really care, and you as a programmer, manager, executive should also really care. As a whole, the tech industry just basically neutered itself, and as a result, they seek their god, AI, to help them escape from the bed that they have shitted on. They would like for AI to lift the roof of the house that they have set on fire after they doused the shitted on bed with gasoline, and they want AI to lift them out of the house as the final escape hatch of all the shit they've built. And here before you, you see the results of this kind of enshittification, and we're going to talk about AI later. However, this is an aside. All right? What is technocracy? So here we go. In the 1930s, Howard Scott, a man in the United States, came up with a movement called Technocracy. This movement became a company. It was incorporated. It also existed in Canada. I'll briefly go over that as well. The idea here is that machines would take over bureaucratic and political structures, completely replacing them. The people who would replace them, nothing but scientists and mathematicians who were fully qualified and academically justified to make decisions for the entirety of nations. Why? Because the technocratic movement believed that humans are essentially just animals or machine systems to kind of balance everything out. Animals are also just machine systems. Therefore, the conclusion is all things are machine systems. As such, a machine system is a closed box of energy input and energy output. These things can be calculated and quantified using mathematical and scientific processes. As a result, the entirety of your lifehood could be calculated as a result of the energy production that you yourself can produce. The technocratic movement then decided in the 1930s that it might be a good idea to replace the existing political system and create a bloodless revolution where machines take over everything and make decisions, including the concept of this: handing out energy bucks. Energy bucks are the equivalent of $20,000 a year, which is the average person's energy output over the course of their lifetime. These energy bucks are a lot like Bitcoin, just a little bit different, in that they are tracked and sold only to you, they belong only to you, and there's some kind of identifying mechanism which they did not get, the technocratic movement didn't give details as to how this works, but the idea would be that these energy bucks only belong to you, which means you could not hoard resources, you could not pass on the things that you earned to your children, they could not inherit them. It would mean the elimination of political instability, it would mean the elimination of, at the time, the economic instability from the First World War. They were going through a Great Depression. You would just remove economic structures entirely. You wouldn't need them. There are no more actual currency dollars. It's now energy dollars. And you would remove crime as well, because how is somebody going to steal your energy bucks? They only belong to you, and somehow, through some unknown method, they're only going to be usable by you. Now, the idea here is that the technocratic movement believed in machines quite heavily. And you might note that there are some very, very big overlaps between the technocratic beliefs at the time and the beliefs that we see with AI systems today. For example, the photocell gives a brain to machines. Where have we heard this before? And indeed, we say that about AI. And we say that AI is at the very least kind of a pseudo-brain replica machine. And the concept here is that at the time, these machines were going to completely replace everything that humans did, and that humans would be assistive to machines, not really the other way around. Where have we seen and heard this before? On top of that, they made the case that machines work 24/7. They do not need to eat. They do not need to poop. They do not need to pee. They do not need to rest. They do not need water. They can continue forever and ever endlessly in order to provide abundance in energy production to the entirety of humankind. And the people at the top who would operate these machines would be qualified, purely mathematical and scientific people of different degrees, not bureaucracies and politicians. This was played out, we went over this on the stream yesterday, with the project Cybersyn in Chile. I don't know. In any case, if we go down here, let's see if we can find the actual images here. I had the actual images. Here we go. This is an actual image of this technocratic movement, which was called Socialist Cybernetics. It was kind of revamped, and we're going to go into how it got revamped and how feminism got wrapped into it and how socialism got wrapped into it and how communism got wrapped into it and how fascism got wrapped into it and so on. The best is the best only cares about the rat. I just went over how the rat whatever. I don't give a shit. Okay, so Chile tried to implement this. And this is an actual control room that they had. It was a very real control room. They created a thing called telex across Chile, which was kind of a internet precursor. And through this system, they were able to transmit large amounts of information through to the entirety of the nation. And their production output went through the roof. They made a bunch of money. Unfortunately, they could not deal with the human factor, and they couldn't deal with the fact that there was too much information to be processed at any given time due to simply through sheer amount of information centralized here. And, a bunch of other things were happening at the same time where workers were being overlooked by the system. They were unhappy. There was already a bit of unrest with the current Socialist Party, yada, yada, yada. We went over this yesterday. And so this is kind of what this leads into, which is the idea of technocracy and how it essentially centralizes information and machine power to top people who have a particular kind of, let's say, academic leaning as a replacement for the political establishment. This did not work out very well for them. Eventually, the people rose up with tanks and weapons and overthrew the government. In any case, continuing on. So with the idea of technocracy then, we have the creator, Howard Scott. Just briefly so you know, we also went over Joshua Haldeman. Joshua Haldeman was the technocratic leader in Canada, a contemporary and friend to Howard Scott. The technocratic movement, by the way, required the technate, which is a map that they considered to be eminent domain to the technocratic movement. You will note that this includes all of South America, all of North America, and Greenland. It is of interest to note that while Elon Musk was buddies with Trump in the White House, Trump was talking a lot about taking over Greenland and even making Canada the 51st state. That's very, very interesting because when Elon Musk left the White House, he stopped talking about it. Well, as it turns out, Joshua Haldeman, one of the leaders of the technocratic movement in Canada and a contemporary of Howard Scott, is the grandfather of Elon Musk. You can now start to see how these kinds of things begin to play out in the world. That being, ideological bends are being implemented through technological means. So we're going to now dig deeper into the idea of the technocratic movement. We start with about the 1930s here to the 1940s with the lead up to the Second World War. And the idea here is that the technocratic movement essentially promotes using machines as replacement for humans or as assistants to humans, much like we talk about today. And so the programming aspects and all of that was starting to become far more widespread, as machines were also becoming far more widespread. Well, then, if you're going to fall asleep, Cybercoster, you're welcome to not stay here. No one's holding you hostage. Now, the technocratic movement starts changing, and it starts turning into what's called cybernetics, much like we've talked about with the Chilean government attempting to use technology to make an impact on their governmental systems. Yeah, peace out, Cyber. Feel free to never show up again. We start with a man named Norbert Weiner, who creates the cybernetic kind of definition in the early 1940s, 1950s, etc. And it builds up in the 1960s. He becomes far more popular. He starts off with this book called God and Golem. And in this book, I think it's down to page 8. Let me see here. Yes. The human use of human beings, is that right? Let me see the... Oh, yeah, okay. So there's a precursor book, so I screwed this up. Professional streamer. No, it's this book I'm thinking of. My apologies, folks. Here, it's this one. This is where he defines human use of human beings, and this is where he defines the idea of cybernetics. And in this book, what he talks about is the concept of humans using machines which use humans. So it's like a cyclical feedback thing. And he describes it this way, which we can see play out today. So right here, okay, this is how we start the entry point into these thoughts in the world at the time with the technocratic cybernetic movement. We ordinarily think of a message as sent from human being to human being. This need not be the case at all. If being lazy, instead of getting out of bed in the morning, I press a button which turns on the heat, closes the window, and starts an electric heating unit under the coffee pot, I am sending messages to all these pieces of apparatus. If, on the other hand, the electric egg boiler starts a whistle going after a certain number of minutes, it is sending me a message. If the thermostat records that the room is too warm and turns off the oil burner, the message may be said to be a method of control of the oil burner. Control, in other words, is nothing but the sending of messages which effectively change the behavior of the recipient. What this essentially reduces down to is the concept of humans not being very different from animals, just simply having the ability to internalize feelings. Ultimately, machines, humans, and animals behave the same way. They send messages to each other, and they attempt to exert control over each other through the use of these messages. And this book touches upon how humans will use machines to send messages to other humans, which then control those other humans. Does that sound familiar? He continues with the idea that the cybernetics is the art of piloting or steersmanship, which is essentially governing a machine. Now, in the book that I should have brought up secondarily and screwed up on page 29, let's see if we can go down there. Right here. He then continues on the line of cybernetics, and he goes, man makes man in his own image. This seems to be the echo or the prototype of the act of creation, by which God is supposed to have made man in his image. Can something similar occur in the less complicated and perhaps more understandable case of the non-living systems that we call machines? What is the image of a machine? Can this image, as embodied in one machine, bring a machine of a general sort, not yet committed to a particular specific identity, to reproduce the original machine, either absolutely or under some change that may be construed as a variation? Can the new and varied machine itself act as an archetype, even as to its own departures from its own archetypal pattern? And so in page 28, he essentially says, I believe, where is it? Oh, yeah. Okay. He says it here. That's what I was reading. He says essentially that man can be like God, where machine can reproduce human-like activities in their own image. That's right. That's what that paragraph. That's what I wanted to gather out of that paragraph. So essentially, using the machine-based, systems, you can create gods out of humans by having humans create machines that are like humans. And so you can start to see where the cybernetic movement essentially goes towards. Now, in the meantime, let me pull up the next one here. In the meantime, with regards to the technocratic movement moving forward, we have this man, Richard Tolman, who is a contemporary of the books, the Weiner books that we just read, and also Howard Scott and the technocratic movement. And he was a co-founder of the Technical Alliance in 1919, which was the technocratic movement before it became known as the Technocracy movement. Now, Tolman was actually a very well-known, well, before I pop this open, he was a very well-respected scientist. He was a mathematical physicist and physical chemist. He made many contributions to statistical mechanics and theoretical cosmology. He was a professor at the California Institute of Technology. As it turns out, not only was he very well known for his work in the scientific field, I'll see if I can properly pull up the image here. I don't know if this will work, but in here, in this image, it's hard to read it. I had to go find a different link, and I can't seem to find it right now. But essentially in this image, here is Tolman on the left, here is Einstein in the middle, and here is Howard Scott on the right, the founder of the technocratic movement. Tolman here is having a conversation with Einstein, and in the subtext down here, which I know you can't read, but I've read it. You're just gonna have to source trust me, bro. You can also find this online yourself. Tolman apparently was talking to Einstein about the technocratic movement, to which Einstein was very, very interested. So we can see now that these kinds of ideas are sparking up in a variety of different ways, and they're being spread throughout the deep, deep recesses of the scientific community in a variety of different ways. Now, let me pull up this book. The cybernetic movement then continues past the 1940s, the 1950s, etc., and becomes kind of like a second wave version of itself. And in the second wave version of itself, this is the second edition, essentially what this book goes over is the self-organization. If we just look for maybe organize, I can't remember exactly where it is in here, but there is this intent where these systems will start to self-regulate and self-organize, much like the human brain does. And so you can see control, communication in the animal and the machine, because essentially animals and machines were seen as not very different from each other. Okay? So this continues to spread. Weiner, let's just have a look at who Norbert Weiner was, since we're talking about him quite a bit. Here we go. He was an American computer scientist, mathematician, and philosopher. He worked at MIT, and he came up with all kinds of useful things in the scientific community around neuroscience, philosophy. He worked a lot with John von Neumann. John von Neumann was also a very popular scientist. You may have even heard of him, involving quantum physics, game theory. I mean, this guy, I believe von Neumann was even involved with the with the Manhattan Project, if I remember correctly. But you can see kind of how these people interrelated and worked together, and the ideas here between cybernetics and technocracy, and machines not being so very different from animals and humans, and then the idea of humans affecting each other and manipulating each other through machines, even at the time of the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, was a very prominent and, very well-known topic discussed in the scientific community. Now, while this was continuing, just give me a sec here. I got to pull up. Okay, that one. While this was continuing, around the 1960s, the idea of cyborgs came to be a thing, and this kind of this was kind of an offshoot of the cybernetic movement. Klein and Klein's, American and Austrian, come up with the idea of a cyborg. And the idea of a cyborg is that you're going to have a biological human being integrate itself with the cybernetic, the technological elements of whatever was available at the time, whatever they could conceive of at the time. And here is an article clipping from July 1960 of Life. And this was kind of the concept behind cyborgs. And this leads into the transhumanist movement. But we'll get there. We're going to take our time. We're going to cook on it. So as a result of this kind of idea, they came up with the concept of having a cyborg and how beneficial it would be. So Klein and Klein here came up with some ideas for how you could use technology and embed it into human beings. So you could think of something like, oh, I don't know, Neuralink. And here you have their concept of what would happen if you put in a cyborg pump to the tail of a rat. It would feed chemicals at a slow, controlled rate into cyborg bloodstreams. It is now being used in cancer work to give drugs to mice, according to the article at the time. It is driven by osmosis, the diffusion of liquids through a membrane. So this concept of merging humans with technology so that they would essentially become indistinguishable from each other, they would become interdependent to each other, is not a new concept. AI is just bringing it to the forefront again in this day and age, but it is definitely not a new project or a new concept. It has existed, again, almost since the 1930s. And you can see one of the kind of long-term, let me zoom out a bit, one of the long-term viewpoints on how they envisioned man, biological man, merging with a machine based on these kinds of articles. And so they would have, you'd carry a battery pack. It would be supplying electric power. You'd have a heart, a food synthesizer. You'd have a replaceable liver. You'd have some thin overalls. You'd have a computer brain. You'd have a chemical plant that regenerates blood by direct circulation from the heart. You would have some collapsed lungs. You'd have a replaceable kidney, etc. You'd have camera eyes. You'd have gravity boots. And so this is kind of what people thought about, especially in the academic scientific community. This is how they envisioned the merging of man and machine in the 1960s. And they were hoping that they could send these cyborgs out to space. And here are some kind of like, future-looking ideas. You'd have an atom chaser, whatever these things are, an optical video sensor connected to optic nerve. You'd have some self-regenerating atomic batteries. You'd have an accessory Venus pump. You'd be dehumanized and drugged. How could you still think of him as a human when he's mostly machine with a few biological parts for the purposes of accomplishing the goal of this transhumanist idea so that we can all benefit from sending these people to space or whatever, etc., 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 etc. You can see how these kinds of things kind of came up into the ethos of the academic and scientific sphere, Klein and Klein, by the way, were not just like these, fiction author writers. They were scientists. All right. And they specialized in these kinds of, technical, you would call it technical science at the time. They worked on like tape. They show off tape from computers which predicted a man's pulse rate from his breath rate. Wiggly lines show left to right breath rate, the actual pulse rate, the predicted pulse rate. You can see that this is the kind of stuff they worked on. These are academic credentialed scientists who were thinking of concepts like this and this, merging man with machine, because in a lot of ways, the people in this field, I don't know if Klein and Klein in particular, but just as a general, concept, as we're about to get into, began to kind of lose sight of the distinction between what makes a human and what makes a machine and how they operate with each other, against each other, and so on. So as we continue, okay, we're not going to go into the first chatbot that was ever created. And the reason why I'm covering all of this, I'm ignoring chat, by the way. The reason why I'm covering all of this is because you have to understand that the entirety of the tech industry has a long history of operating in the way that it does now. And again, I just want to bring out that there is definitely some ideological aspects at play which have infected the scientific, academic, and technical procedures of how we got here today many, many years ago, when we were all but spermatozoids in our dad's spermatozoid, who was also a spermatozoid in his dad's balls, free of microplastics, all right? Back before that was a thing. So here is the first chatbot. I got to do a stupid AI verification thing. Okay. So this is from the New York Times. This is from the New York Times in 1965. Computerized typewriter leads schizoid children toward normal life by helping them to read. The idea behind this, and by the way, who was it? Who invented the typewriter? Shoot, I can't remember. We'll get to it. But a very popular name that as soon as I say it, you will all recognize it, supported this. And so what happened here is that they essentially automated the typewriter. So children, it's called the Edison Responsive Environment Learning System. Children from 5 years old upwards spent up to a 5-month period without any formal instruction from teachers. And again, remember, this is 1965, and they would sit in front of this automated typewriter, and then they would type stuff out, or the typewriter would talk to the student. And here, let's just have a little read. The computerized typewriter allows its users to explore freely. It has infinite patience. There are no punishments when a wrong key is punched. There is no competition. It has inflexible logic. This is really important. I just want to point this out, that the logic behind this thing was inflexible indeed. It never varies. It never makes a mistake. The machine consists of a computer about the size of a small upright piano with a typewriter keyboard in front. It has a speaker and a frame above the typewriter for printed matter. The first thing a child does is press one of these standard typewriter keys. This prints the character in large type. At the same type, a soft voice automatically identifies it through the speaker. The computer can be programmed vocally and visually, or both together. When a letter is selected by a recorded voice, all the remaining keys are locked. The machine waits indefinitely while the child punches away until the right key is hit before it automatically calls the next one. In other words, the child could not get it wrong. If this automated typewriter, told the child that you have to press this key, all other keys are locked. The child would just work through it until it hit the right key, and then Bob's your uncle. Then letters lead to words, and words to sentences, and sentences lead to stories. And this was actually practiced in hospitals. And you know what? As a result of this extremely constrained logic, this automated chatbot via typewriter machine, kids actually saw some positive impacts using this machine. You could not make a mistake, for example. You were very funneled into a specific kind of like writing procedure, which helped these children who usually suffered from schizophrenia to kind of hone in on what they were capable and not capable of doing, and kind of reconstruct thoughts that were important to them. And it was good. It was a good thing. Keep this in mind, because again, I just want to emphasize that the entire, AI chatbot thing as like having benefits is not the first time. This isn't novel and new. We have done this before in the form of automated typewriters. And here, I'll show you just a little brief thing here. If I go and open up this PDF here, we have this PDF. And it goes into a lot of detail with regards to the talking typewriter, as they call it. And I won't read this entire thing; it's quite long. You get the point. But there's just some interesting pictures. I just want you guys to see how it operated. You have the audio output up here. Here, I'll zoom in even more. There's some audio output over here. There's the keys down here. There's a little bit of a display, I believe, over here. There's the typewriter getting fed, and you could hear and talk and communicate and so on, right? The first chatbot in 1965. Now, let's continue. So again, this is all to kind of give you the sense of how the technocratic movement led into, the expansion of these kinds of technologies, replacing the concept of actual humans. Now, in this case, this is a good thing, right? This is good. There's nothing wrong with this. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with this. What I'm saying is that these things that we have today absolutely existed before you and I did, most likely. Here's another one. I don't know if you guys have ever seen this one, but this is the General Electric walking truck. I'm going to pull open a video. I'm not going to play the audio. And so here it is. This is from the 1960s, I believe early 1960s, and we're going to see it here. Let me just make sure that I'm not going to pop open anything weird. No, looks fine. Here. So we'll pop it open, and here we're going to have a look at how this thing operated. Okay, these are the kinds of things that that existed. Again, this is with regards to the merging of man and machine. Okay. Welcome in, everybody. I'm kind of ignoring chat so I can focus on this. But yeah, welcome in, Bricky. How you doing? Yeah, Ghost. Yeah. But you can see how this kind of machine. Look at that, 1960s. And so when you think of like the those robots that you see now in the commercials where people are like kicking them all the time, I can't remember what the name of the company is, and they generate these robots that like learn how to walk and etc. And people keep kicking them down, they keep getting back up. Here you have the first implementation via General Electric for the U.S. Army. This was bought and paid for by the U.S. Army. This was happening in the 1960s. And again, I just want you to grasp the concept. Whoever just did the follow or whatever, I appreciate that. Again, I'm kind of ignoring chat, but still, I appreciate it. Thank you, Boston Dynamics. There you go. So you can kind of see the concept here, which is that the entire academic, scientific, and technical movement started to try and play around with the concept of merging man with machine, the transhumanist movement at play, where these machines would do way better than any human could do alone, or together they would do way better than most. Look at that. It's kicking. Look at this. Look at how insane this is. This is crazy. Absolutely crazy. By the way, how are you doing, Travis? Good to see you, man. Look at this. Look at the precision here. And I want you to think about now what you've seen typically from these AI robotic systems in commercials and whatnot in the current day and age. Right? Look at all that. That's crazy. Okay, so you guys get the point. Right? You guys get the point. This is very cool. I don't think it shows like anything else in particular. Oh yeah, this is kind of cool. Check this out. I don't know if they show it, but crush it, crush it, come on, crush it. It doesn't show it. In any case, you get the point, right? And so that was going on. So General Electric around the 60s was doing it. Now, Raytheon, have you heard of Raytheon? Raytheon was also participating in these kinds of movements around the 60s. Raytheon created the machine that mimics the brain. They called it the Cybertron. And so here you have one of the first AI systems, one of, but we're going to get into the actual first one. But here you have the Cybertron created by Raytheon. If you know who Raytheon is, when you know, you know. So what they did was they attempted to recreate the brain. And in the, let me see, 1961, I just want to point the date out, okay? In 1961, they started looking at how they might be able to duplicate the neural networks of the human brain, but they didn't quite go that far. Instead, what they did was they replicated the human learning process, experience, trial and error, correlation of new facts with past experiences. And they created a machine that mimics very much the style of AI machines that we have today, which is reinforcement learning through positive rewards, thumbs up, thumbs down. And they even had this machine offload decisions that were considered approved into a separate memory bank, so that the processing machine, the entire AI machine, could continue to be used in repetition without having it like layer memory upon memory upon memory. Think of it as like an external hard drive to the decisions that it already came out with as good decisions. And then it would just go back and reference those good decisions, forgetting the way that it learned how to make that good decision via the human, feedback loop. And then it would just, bring that back in when it needed to, creating like a cross-reference DB of like, when it needs to make a subsequent decision. Have I already made this decision before? Have I made a related decision? Let me go back and look at my external hard drive, etc., etc. So Raytheon was working on this. We also have, let me go down to here. We also have John McCarthy. John McCarthy, some of you might recognize the name. He was around during the time when these systems were being built, and he created one of the first AI systems based on Lisp. And the reason why he created, in particular, Lisp and then Algol is because he was working on AI systems. He received accolades for his work on AI systems as part of Lisp. He would look at primitive recursive functions, for example, functional programming with lambda calculus, etc., etc., garbage collection, automatic memory management to solve problems in Lisp. And all of these things contributed to the AI movement at the time. He himself was also, for what it's worth, he was an atheist and a communist, raised as a communist rather, and then later became a conservative Republican, and talked about the mental qualities, ascribing mental qualities to machines, which we've seen today. We've covered scientific articles where there are warnings about anthropomorphizing these AI systems. And he kind of went a little bit, he kind of took it to the next level at the time. He said machines as simple as thermostats can be said to have beliefs, and having beliefs seems to be a characteristic of most machines capable of problem-solving performance. And there we have the anthropomorphization of these AI systems, from someone like John McCarthy. Now, let me pull up the next one. We have, okay, we covered that. We covered the GE thing. Okay, now we have Lewis Mumford. Who is Lewis Mumford? Lewis Mumford, around this time, was a sociologist, historian, philosopher of technology, and literary critic. And he published an article about how cybernetics could overcome disobedient humans. But he kind of did it as a warning sign. He was kind of very negative against the technocratic cybernetic movement, and he was kind of sending out warning signals, much like I do here on these streams to you guys today. And his warning signal was the following. Here we have an article from 1964 from Lewis Mumford. And here, this paragraph, let me zoom in nice and tight. Through mechanization, automation, cybernetic direction, this authoritarian technics has at last successfully overcome its most serious weakness, its original dependence upon resistant, sometimes actively disobedient servo mechanisms, still human enough to harbor purposes that do not always coincide with those of the system. These servo mechanisms was his way of talking about machines that either mimicked human style, like human belief systems, or humans in and of themselves. Because he was attacking it from the beliefs of these cybernetic technocrats who believed that these servo mechanisms were really no different than humans, and we should treat humans as such. And so from an internal critique point of view, he was saying, well, it looks like they figured out how to control humans, and by extension, too, how to control machines. It's actually backwards. Once you know how to control machines, you know how to control humans, which goes back to the reason why I brought up Weiner's books at the beginning, where the signal of a machine controls a human. When the teapot, whistles, a human goes, "Up, I better do this thing." Who created the teapot? A human. And so the human creates the machine that controls the human. Okay? So these ideas were playing around. And while these things were playing around, the U.S. Army was, like we said with General Electric there, the U.S. Army was no stranger to the concept of artificial intelligence in the form that we would recognize it today. And what do I mean by this? Well, Cornell University has an article here. Check this out. Frank Rosenblatt works on the electronic profile analyzing computer, a precursor to the perceptron. What is the perceptron? In July 1958, the U.S. Office of Naval Research unveiled a remarkable invention. An IBM 704, a 5-ton computer the size of a room, was fed a series of punch cards. After 50 trials, the computer taught itself to distinguish cards marked on the left from cards marked on the right. Yes, the U.S. Navy had this IBM machine that could make a determination of cards based on visual perception. That's why it was called the perceptron. The first machine which is capable of having an original idea. Have we heard this before? Have we heard it before with AI? Oh yes, it creates novel ideas all the time. Well, apparently so did the perceptron in the 1950s. Where did that go? At the time, Rosenblatt, who later became an associate professor of neurobiology and behavior in Cornell's Division of Biological Sciences, was a research psychologist and project engineer at the Cornell Aeronautical Laboratory in Buffalo, New York. He was fascinated by machines that acted like humans, and so he began looking into it. His background in psychology helped shape his artificial intelligence research because he had the notion of how brains kind of like interacted with the stuff around them via his psychological background. And so he creates the perceptron. Okay. Now, the idea behind this is that it would mimic the organization of a biological brain. Gee, where have we heard this before? Have we heard the idea of an AI system mimicking the biology of a brain? Once more, this is not new. This has been around for a very long time. Continuing on, he builds the perceptron. Here he is working on the perceptron, right? And so we can kind of, let me see if I can zoom. I don't think I can zoom in properly, but in any case. And as he continues building the perceptron, so here is Frank Rosenblatt and Charles Reitman work on the unit that became the first perceptron in December 1958. I just want to see if we can open up. Yeah, here we go. And here they are working on it. Look at this, right? This is the first part of the perceptron, and the first real AI system. Now, this leads to Minsky. Minsky here, if you don't know who Marvin Minsky is, he was an MIT professor whose research into neural networks left him deeply skeptical of Rosenblatt's claims. They were kind of at odds with each other, and then they worked together. And then what happened to Minsky? Well, who is Marvin Minsky? Marvin Minsky was an American cognitive and computer scientist concerned largely with research in artificial intelligence. He co-founded the Massachusetts Institute of Technology's AI Laboratory and wrote extensively about AI and philosophy. He is considered the father of AI because his work with Frank Rosenblatt and the perceptron basically set the ground for the academic, scientific, and technical rigor that is used for creating AI systems today. He won the Turing Award. He's one of the most cited, well-known people in the AI community, so on and so forth. So again, I'm laying the groundwork here for how these things operated in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, and how they have an impact today. 2020s, they're going to have an impact in the 2030s and so on. We're talking an almost generational gap. And these ideas are still playing out before our very eyes. And if you're a programmer out there, like it or not, one way or another, you're participating in what is a long history, in terms of life, a person's life of these kinds of systems. Okay, now, let's see, we've covered that. We covered Mumford, we've covered the perceptron, we've covered Marvin Minsky. Okay, and then as one of the final things here that's going on at the time, we have the creation of ARPANET. Now, you might kind of recognize the word ARPA without the D in front of it. And yes, there is a relation there, but we're not getting into that in this stream. There's actually quite a few threads I'm pulling here, and I'm jumping around from people to people and topic to topic because these are the foundational starting points of these threads. And once you start pulling on one of these threads, it goes, I'm not kidding, bro. I slept like 4 hours last night. I read probably 300 to 400 pages of just dense articles, studies, maybe more actually, over the last 24 hours. I'm tired. This stuff is deep, and it's going to be a slow burn. You know how I do here. So in any case, so we have ARPANET here. It is the U.S. Advanced Research Projects Agency Network. It was the first public packet-switched computer network. It was first used in 1969 and decommissioned in 1989. Many of the protocols used by computer networks today were developed for ARPANET, and it is considered the forerunner of the modern internet. So this is what I mean when I talk about the concept of these kinds of systems having existed for a very long time and in a variety of different ways in academic and scientific fields, including, for example, governmental, federal, military, scientific, social, psychological, mathematical. Einstein was, at least on the outskirts of technocracy when it was around. When it was around. All of these things, kind of spread, and people's ideas of what would happen. Books were born out of this. Ideas were born out of this. Literal AI systems were born out of this based on the capability of hardware at the time. The internet was born out of this, because how on earth are you going to create a technocracy unless you create the internet? A technocratic movement cannot exist without the internet, because you need the mass traversal of information across entire nations, especially if you look at, for example, the TechNate map here. How would you spread information to Greenland, when Elon was pushing Musk to take over Greenland because Musk's grandfather was in the technocratic movement? Come on, how dumb do you think we are? Of course, you would need the internet at the time in the 1930s to 50s when this kind of map was being generated. Of course, you would need something like ARPANET to exist. Of course, you would need cyborgs to exist. Of course, you would need to kind of blur the lines between what makes a human, what makes an animal, what makes a machine. These things would have to be blurred necessarily. Otherwise, the entire concept of energy input and output in a closed box system doesn't make sense. You can't have manipulation of people. You can't have subservient people. You take note of the Chilean, government thing that we went over yesterday, where the people uprise and they take tanks and weapons and other things, and they can overthrow the government regardless of how well the technocracy is implemented. Yada yada yada. All of these things had to take place. You can see how they offshoot off of each other, and maybe the people who created ARPANET may not have been involved in technocracy. I most certainly cannot find any evidence of this, but what I am pointing to is that these ideas begin to spread within these communities, and they spawn branches, and we get to where we are today. Now, what the hell does this have to do with feminism? What on earth are you talking about, Spiro? Margaret Mead. Let me take a sip. Welcome in, everybody. John, welcome in. Baby Yoda, how you doing? I didn't say hi. D-Daver, how you doing? I'm ignoring chat because I'm kind of sticking to it. Let me take a sip here. Okay, who is Margaret Mead? Hoo boy. Margaret Mead was an American cultural anthropologist, author, and speaker who appeared frequently in the mass media during the 1960s and 1970s. She earned her bachelor's degree at Barnard College of Columbia University and her MA and PhD degrees from Columbia. Mead served as the president of the American Association for the Advancement of Science. Mead was a communicator of anthropology in modern America and Western culture, and was often controversial as an academic. Here she is. Her reports detailing the attitudes towards sex in South Pacific and Southeast Asian traditional cultures influenced the 1960s sexual revolution. She was a proponent of broadening sexual conventions within the context of Western cultural traditions. But Spiro, what the ever-living fuck does this have to do with tech? Let's pause for a moment, shall we? Let me pull up the links here. First of all, just a little insight into the time before she became very popular. This is from a book she wrote called The South Seas. And she says the following: "We are at a crossroads and must decide." This is from like 1930s, very early 1939. "We are at a crossroads and must decide whether we go forward towards a more ordered heterogeneity or make a frightened retreat to some single standard which will waste 9/10 of the potentialities of the human race in order that we may have a too dearly purchased security. We have an opportunity to conceive, and out of that conception begin to build a world which shall be as new in the ordered interplay given to man's myriad gifts as the present world is new in the technological utilization of physical resources. The imminence of other problems, the need to find some general solution for the problems of poverty and war, should not blind us to the importance of building a world which is not only safe in terms of obtaining a living and safe against meaningless aggression, but also safe from the ever-present danger that one version of life, a version which uses only a tithe of human capabilities, will be forced upon everyone. If we solve our economic and international problems with sophistication, but compromise that solution by attaching it to an oversimplified and naive view of personality and culture, we hamstring the future. But if we hold before us as a goal a world in which each gift will have its place, we may be able to make the necessary social inventions to construct a world of interrelated and integrated values which will replace both the homogeneity of the savage and the confused and frustrating heterogeneity of the 20th century. Let's pull the next book. Later on, she writes kind of towards the end of her life, maybe kind of midway, I should say, around the 1972. Let me just do a here. Let me do this proper here. Maybe I should pull it out in a. I'll pull it out in a different. One sec. I got to do this correct. Otherwise, it's not going to work properly for you guys. Let me do this correctly, okay? So if I do this, and then I pull out. She has a book. It's called Blackberry Winter, and it's kind of a autobiography of her own life, much after she became very popular, and we're about to find out how popular and how well embedded she became in different communities that would have a wide-reaching impact into our lives today. So let me do this over here. Let me let me see if this will work here. Come on, archive. Give it to me. There we go. Here we go. All right. So here we have Margaret Mead. Here she is. And her Blackberry Winter, My Earlier Years. Now, does anybody remember, out of curiosity, who the creator of, let's go up to the top here. Who is the creator of this movement, the Technocratic movement? Howard Scott. Howard Scott was the creator of the Technocratic movement. Now, interestingly, we find that she knew Howard Scott. As a matter of fact, she knew and was very close friends with someone who Howard Scott had a very romantic relationship with. Now, if we look, let me just look up the word Howard. He shows up several times in this book. We're gonna tackle exactly one. Okay. So here we go. Let me do a full screen here. One of my troubled friends, Eleanor Steele, who was, by her own rights, quite popular among socialist movements, I believe, who was beautiful and amiable, and also vulnerable because she was so pliant to other people's wishes. Just out of college, she had fallen in love with Howard Scott, the magnetic founder of Technocracy. Howard was married, or so we believed. Later, we learned how easy it was for people to make up stories about Howard. In any event, we believed that Howard had a wife, and he did have a mistress, an actress whom he saw perform in a magnificent presentation of King Lear. And then there was Eleanor. So it seems like Howard kind of, he got it, Howard, admittedly, was a very tall man, more than 6 feet tall. I believe that's what she describes in this book, as a matter of fact. And he had a very kind of enigmatic, charismatic personality. The problem with Howard Scott, as described by Margaret Mead here, is that when it came time for him to represent his technocratic views, he had a problem expressing them properly, and so people mistook his views for something they were not. And so Margaret Mead here ends up having some one-on-one conversations with Howard Scott the founder of the technocratic movement, where she begins to understand his views. And she even begins to repeat them in this autobiography, where she says things like, we need to organize consumption. We need to use modern techniques, modern machinery. Howard is misunderstood. We became close friends. He explained it to me a lot of times. He started to receive criticism, and I don't know where this criticism came from. Part of it was because he could not. So I think, where was it? He gave miserable speeches. He couldn't advocate for himself properly. That's right about here, right? And so as a result, she had to kind of internalize the arguments that Howard Scott made with regards to the technocratic movement. Okay, all right. So Margaret Mead becomes very, 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 very involved and then starts repeating the belief systems of the technocratic movement because she very much believes them. Why would Margaret Mead believe a movement like this? What would possibly, pull someone like Margaret Mead into this kind of a system? Well, hang on, I just got to pull the right thing here. I'm going to close this. We're going to go back to the end here. When we go have a look at her Wikipedia again, now let's keep reading. So, as we continue through her life story, we get to the point where in her personal life, around the 20s, she went to Samoa and she did a psychological study on the Samoan people there. And what she took away from that study, which... let's pull up the study itself. This is a kind of like a meta-analysis of that study. Coming of Age, but not in Samoa, Reflections on Margaret Mead's Legacy for Western Liberal Feminism. She decided that for some reason or another, and she was vehemently opposed for this study, at least to some degree, she somehow came to the conclusion that these Samoan women in this Samoan village or nation or whatever it was, were essentially treated in a particular way that promoted feminist ideology. This was at a time when feminism was going through its second wave. And she took this study and she, according to some people, misrepresented her study results and said, well, look at the Samoan people here and how they treat their woman. And there's a benefit to the matriarchal, ultimate matriarchal position, or at the very least, the feminist movement itself. And so now we go into the 30s, and she begins to look at Howard Scott. And now what I want you to do is, for but a moment, I beg of you, to think back on all the articles that I just went over, because I know some of you are going, what the fuck are you on, Spiro? I want you to go back through the articles I went over. I'm going to go back right now, and I want you to start thinking about the concept that came out of Technocracy and Cybernetics, that being that man can be manipulated by machine, that man can become like God, recreating machines in his own image, that there is a very real worry that machines can make man subservient to authoritarian systems, the idea of the cybernetic and technocratic elite at the top, bundled in with the benefits as you see here. Now you start to kind of see a line where man, machine, and animal, as Norbert Weiner here began to propose in the cybernetic movement, they no longer are as distinct as we think they are. And even the Technocratic study course, a very dense book that I have read front to back once, I could only stomach it once, goes through an entire set of scientific studies that they pull up as proof that man is really no different from animal. Their best proof? If man was moral, and morality was a fundamental aspect of man, thus differentiating them from animals, then you would not see man, who is hungry and poor, let go of their morality and steal and murder in order to take care of themselves or others. When put up against the wall, man will behave no differently than animals, and since we can define animals as a system of inputs and outputs, electrical signals in the brain through the physical body, therefore, the actual distinction between man and animals is really no different than that of man and machine. It's all electrical inputs and outputs. And now you can see where the concept of the matrix, for example, plays into this, where the concept of kind of the fluidity of people and who they are begins to play into this, and why people start looking at things like, I wonder what it would look like if we fully merged machines, Neuralink, with mankind, humans, biological. And someone like Margaret Mead, now having the means to attack the patriarchal society that exists around her with the hierarchy that she feels, it goes against second wave feminism with the background of her Samoan study and now the technocratic movement, whereupon she can now say, hey, so let's get into this. She can say, hey, wouldn't it be better if we had people in government who were based solely on merit? And you know what? To a degree, I absolutely agree with this concept. Whether you are a woman or a man, if you can write good code, just as an example, if you can write good code, we need you. Absolutely. I don't care if you're a man or a woman. If you can write good code by your merits, welcome aboard. Okay? However, what you start to see here is an ideological bend. In 1968, she helps to establish, with the help of others who she became buddies with, she starts to establish the cybernetic society. So she literally took her learnings from all the stuff that she got from the technocratic movement, from the cybernetic stuff that was coming out of Robert Weiner, from the scientific community, and she establishes an entire cybernetic society. She helps to establish it. She's one of the key fundamental players. She's considered one of the founders. And here she is in Atlanta making an opening speech kind of a thing, like an announcement. And the entire concept here is, hey, we can remove the structure of men. Let's remove the structure of men and let's do what the Chileans did here. I don't know if I can even... Let's do this. This is what we need to do. Where people sit in a room like this, they get funneled through a centralized form of machinery, a bunch of data, and then they make quantifiable decisions, because at the end of the day, aren't all humans machines? Aren't all humans just inputs and outputs? And you know what? If you want to have full governmental control over the entire society, well, that's really easy, because you just treat everybody as a machine. You use machines to control machines. You use data to manipulate people. This stuff not only was happening in the 60s, it played out in Chile in real life. And Margaret Mead used that to her advantage. And she bundled in. That's the difference. It's not that the idea of meritocracy or that women having merit should be completely dismissed simply because you are a woman. That's not what I'm talking about here. What I'm talking about here is the bundling in of an ideology into the very fabric of an otherwise purely logical system. This stuff has been happening for a long, long time. And Margaret Mead was one of the first people to very, 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 very overtly and explicitly bundle in an ideological bend. Although she was not the only one. And right-wing people also tried to bundle in a bunch of ideological stuff into the technological, landscape. We will get into that, I promise you. The right-wing, whatever, or people who are against these kinds of ideologies are not themselves exempt from doing this. Okay? But right now, this is the kind of the thread that we're following, because there are direct connections here. I'm trying to draw direct links. Okay. So she creates the cybernetic society, right? Now, just so you know, the cybernetic society, the cybernetic movement that started with her and her buddies continues to this day. This is an event on Future Cafe, the future of cybernetics, Wednesday, October 23rd, 2019. I'm going to read this out to you, and I want you to pay attention to the verbiage. 2019. Cybernetics and cyborgs might develop in 100, 200 years. What are the applications of cybernetics? What will happen if we become cyborgs? Are we already cyborgs? Anthropologist Margaret Mead explored how cybernetics could be used to create a cross-disciplinary language for exports. I apologize, that's experts. And Donna Haraway, professor at UCSC, argues that uploading our consciousness into machine bodies, becoming cyborgs, will solve dualisms of human and animal, human-animal and machine, self and other, mind and body, and binary gender. Are you starting to see? She writes in her hailed A Cyborg Manifesto in 1991, this is a dream not of a common language, but of a powerful, infidel heteroglossia. She declares, we can be responsible for machines. They do not dominate us or threaten us. We are responsible for boundaries. We are they. This is what has come out of Margaret Mead's cybernetic movement. Now let's go back now that we've got that, into what Margaret Mead believed in. So she had a few questionable, sexual identifications that were never confirmed. Mead never openly identified herself as lesbian or bisexual. In her writings, she proposed that it is to be expected that an individual's sexual orientation may evolve throughout life. As things continued, she had a number of different people that she was romantically attached with. And then she ends up marrying. So here we go. This is her Samoan, her Samoan study, etc. She becomes kind of like involved with people like Derek Freeman, psychological, powerhouses, people who take kind of a little bit of a few touches from her works, Pinckner, Dawkins, Ridley, etc., etc. You can see the body of her work. However, things start to get interesting because now that in her mind she's married and she tries to use the technological and kind of like energetic input-output systems to blur the lines between what is gender, what is biology, what is a human, etc., she marries someone named, I believe, Bateson. Okay? Let's see if Gregory Bateson. Gregory Bateson was a cyberneticist who joined along with her in the creation of the cybernetic movement. They together worked in, let's say, quite a few things. Let me pull up this article. How Margaret Mead's research into utopias, like the technocratic utopia, helped usher in the psychedelic era. Pioneering anthropologist Margaret Mead came of age in a time of enormous change and uncertainty. In the aftermath of World War I, as technologies like the radio and automobile began to take hold, Mead and her husband, Gregory Bateson, began to formulate a vision for utopia that relied upon plant-based psychedelics. They saw science as something which was responsible for some of the bad things in the world, historian Benjamin Breen says, but also as something which could be a tool for fixing the world or healing a sick society. Her specific interest in psychedelics took hold in 1930 when doing field work on the Omaha Reservation in Nebraska. She noticed the people of the reservation were using peyote. And so down the timeline of her work, right around 1932, when Howard Scott pops up, shortly after this, Technocracy, and then down the line, Cyberneticism. Okay? Gregory Bateson, after the atomic bombing of Hiroshima, writes a memo to the head of the OSS, the Office of Strategic Services, saying that unconventional means of warfare will predominate in the years to come. And so this idea of psychological warfare being more important than the warfare of conventional arms, that becomes really important in the Cold War. The specter of LSD being released as a gas in a subway system, for instance, that of course never comes to pass. But the idea that there's a war that can be expressed in a form of psychology, that we can fight battles through mass manipulation and through the media and through psychological techniques, I think that's very, very important to the history of the Cold War. And even in the present, we're living through it. On Mead's involvement with the Mary Circle, a group that conducted psychedelic research related to World War II. So she participated in truth drugs, and she attempted to find drugs that would be considered part of the psychological warfare umbrella in order to get people to tell the truth. They became known as the Mary Circle. By the early Cold War, about 1952, the Mary Circle was co-opted by who? The CIA. Huh. On NASA-funded programs in the 60s to teach dolphins to speak using LSD. The person at the center of this story is a guy named John C. Lilly, who Bateson, the husband, in about 1961, ends up writing to, and they become friends. Lilly invites Gregory Bateson, Margaret Mead's husband, to join him at this dolphin research lab he set up with NASA funding and U.S. Navy funding in the U.S. Virgin Islands. And John C. Lilly is a physiologist. This is early neuroscience. They wanted to communicate with dolphins and whales and what is this? Cetaceans? And meanwhile, Lilly is injecting the dolphins with LSD and then himself with LSD and literally spending hours trying to talk to them. You can listen to the recordings. If you search online for the words John C. Lilly, Dolphin, LSD, Stanford, you will find many, many tape recordings of this, and he doesn't make much progress, suffice it to say. On Mead's bisexuality. She was very secretive about her sexuality. However, if you dig into her books, you can get hints that she was, at the very least, in some kind of fluid, gender spectrum. And she believed it to be so because she felt like genderness and, sexual attraction, whatever you want to call it, evolved as you grew older. She is remembered as a pioneer in understanding specifically the difference between gender and sexuality. And the therapy of psychedelics in the 50s helped her to come up with some of these concepts. Meanwhile, in the 60s, she is creating the Cybernetics movement. Now, if you look at this person, at Margaret Mead and her husband, at the same time, working together in these different capacities, being involved with all these kinds of people, MIT, US Army, apparently the fucking CIA, all of these kinds of ideological backgrounds because they themselves believe in it, then you can kind of see how it absolutely matches up with the belief system of the technocratic movement, because the technocratic movement provides a very, very scientific sounding delineation point between what makes a human, let alone what makes a human a female. If you can just kind of obfuscate away what makes a human, then it honestly doesn't even matter what makes a male or a female, right? At that point, who cares? And so it is at this point that we're going to put a pause on this. But what I will say is, in the Macy conferences, these are some conferences that Margaret Mead went with her husband from the 40s to the 60s. A lot of people who we would consider as foundational to technical aspects of what we do today. We already covered a few. They participated in these conferences, and Mead was extremely well known and respected at the time. If we look at some of the people who attended, let me see if I can go down and find. Yeah, here we go. So you can see people like, let's see if we can name drop a few names here. So we have her husband, obviously. We have, let's see, Howard Liddell. That might be a familiar name to some people. We have, let's see here, Claude Shannon. That might be a familiar name to people. The father of the information theory. We have John von Neumann, a fundamental cornerstone of the scientific progress in terms of computer science and engineering and even some mathematical stuff. And it only continues if you look at some of the people who participated in these Macy conferences, and they were talking about things like, gee, I don't know, consideration of the effects of pharmacological agents on the overall circulation and metabolism of the brain, followed by functional organization of the brain, followed by studies of electrical activity of the brain in relation to anesthesia, etc., etc., etc. You have Stanley Cobb. Some of you might recognize him. You've got, let's see, not Freeman, not Lehrman. Who else do we have? Theodore Schwartz. No, I don't recognize anybody here, but I did recognize a few names when I went through this. So these are the people that they were hobnobbing with, hanging out with, sharing ideas with, studying the brain with, and coming up with all of these concepts that we see today with these AI systems. And that brings this episode of the Technocratic movement to an end. There you go. You have a much deeper historical view into what the Technocratic movement was, who was involved behind it, direct links between the ideological background behind them. And if you're paying attention to what I'm saying and what I've said in the past, hopefully you're seeing some of the links that I'm making with regards to how these things are playing out today. But in case you don't worry. We'll get there. We'll get there. Now, it doesn't end there. I'm going to take a break and catch up with chat. And then we're going to read some very dense, three, well, kind of two, 1.5. We're going to read 1.5 dense scientific articles on the death of AI. Okay, because I found some really good stuff yesterday. One is kind of like an additional point to stuff I've been talking about before. And one is a very deep technical AI paper by somebody who's considered a leader in the AI space. And it's super fascinating, but it's a dense read. But I need to get it on record for the purposes of upcoming debates that I have scheduled and talking about this stuff and understanding how this stuff plays out right now. So, yeah. Hey, Vamp, how you doing, man? So, Travis, I think I said hi. Thanks, I'm a god. Baby Yoda. I think I said hi to you guys. Did somebody leave? Somebody was saying goodnight. Good night, whoever was. BYK. Yeah. Sabas, thank you for the follow 50 minutes ago. I appreciate it. Let me see if I'm missing anyone. Evil Eye, how you doing? Ghost, what's going on? Vicente, yeah, how's it going, man? Pure, I think I saw you. How you doing? Pure Coin, how are you? TMX, Bricky, Abe. Yeah, how's it going, guys? Good to see you. Just taking a break here before I just spent half a day trying to set up a GitLab instance because Grok misled me with one line of code. Typical. Your first mistake using Grok. It's a movement that wants to erase human nature through pure logic, disregarding the fact that it is human nature to insert ideologies that oppose pure logic. correct. At least partially correct. That I would even say that's only part of the entire concept. But yeah, it is definitely part of it. Yeah. Did Trump sign an executive order to ban digital currency? I don't think so. I think he signed an order to let loose AI. What's up, Crispy? How you doing, man? Good to see you. I could be wrong. I could be wrong about it. I'm not sure, man. I'll have to go look it up. What was that? Oh, whoops. I tapped that. That's going to be loud. I apologize. Whoever just gave me the follow just now, I appreciate it. How you doing? Okay. Let me take one more sip and then we'll do the AI portion. We'll do the death of AI and then I'll call it. Guys, if you like the information I'm presenting here and the reasoning behind going through all the history and stuff and tying it into, the current state of ideological movements and stuff, I do please consider financially contributing. That means a lot to me. I have some insanely kind and generous financial contributors. It helps pay the bills. People don't like me talking about this. They get very pissed off, easily triggered or bored or whatever. It causes problems for me. So the financial support helps. However, if you cannot financially contribute, which is absolutely okay, by the way, it's not even the most important point. Here's the most important point. This information needs to get in front of more people so more people understand what the hell is going on out there. Consumers need to understand where this kind of technological incompetency stems from, the historical aspect of it, why they should be voting with their dollars and not paying for shit. You don't have to. We can do better. We have all the tools and techniques that we need in order to even just entirely step away from LLMs, just entirely, and solve a whole bunch of problems and do it very, very well. You have to vote with your dollar, primarily I want you guys to be, empowered by the information to do that. And programmers need to understand that they have to go back to fundamentals and so on and so forth. In order to persuade people, I need your help. Like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. That's the ultimate way. That's the ultimate thing I ask. That's way more important than any other contribution you could make. And I really do appreciate that. All right. So let's get into a couple of AI papers. Let me pull them up here. I'll pull this guy up. I will pull, I believe it's this one as well. Correct. And then this third one. So I'm going to do two papers. They are going to be mostly... The first two papers I'm mostly going to just summarize. I'm going to have to pull them up in the other browser, aren't I? My bad. Oh, thanks, oh my God. I appreciate that. Yeah, people definitely need to know about, all this kind of stuff to help them out with ensuring that they understand where they should be spending their money and that you don't have to accept the stupidity that goes on. Okay, so will this work now? Let's say I do that and that. Ah, crap. How am I going to do this now? One sec. I screwed up and I didn't properly pull in. How will I do this? If I go like this. What about this? Yeah, here we go. Sure. Okay. I do this. One sec. It's giving me this weird... I'm having a weird issue here. One sec, folks. If this link works over here, why doesn't it work here? I gotta figure this out. If I go to this, will that work? Okay, that does work. So then I could probably open up. Yeah. And then sort by date modified. Will this work? Sure. I don't care. Open it up in Edge. What the hell do I care? Okay, that one worked. So one more, and then I'm fine. That was weird. I don't know why it did not work. Why it didn't work properly. But I'm gonna get this. I will absolutely get this going. No, that's the wrong one. Open this one. Go like this. Grab it. Open it again. That's the second one. Okay, and then do I have any more? I think I only have this guy. So I'll just pop this open. I should have done this before, but whatever. Okay, and then find the whatever the PDF is over here. Is this the one? This is the one. Okay, we're good. Figured it out. All right. So these are two studies. Real pro streamer, I know. Yeah, I'll have to look at the open source stuff. Yeah, I'll have to look at the open source stuff. You're right, Baby Yoda. I'll dig into that. So we're gonna look at these two studies, and then we'll cover like a very important one that I think spells the death of AI, as it is today. So I'll close this up, close that up, and we'll do this, and I'll zoom in, and then I'll switch you guys over. So here we have a study, The Automation Trap, Unpacking the Consequences of Over-Reliance on AI in Education and Its Hidden Costs. This is a common kind of argument that I hear about using AI to learn, because there's some kind of supposed benefit of using AI to enhance your learning ability, especially in terms of finding information and learning about different topics. So there are two studies that we're going to go over, and we're just going to kind of read the abstracts and a few bits and pieces, and you'll see that the concept of learning as studied in universities and classrooms, which should be you should be able to point to universities and classrooms and show a overwhelming amount of benefit to using AI in learning. It doesn't exist. It just doesn't exist. The growing presence of artificial intelligence in classrooms, influence on students' thinking, learning, and interaction deserves close scrutiny, yada, yada, yada. Excessive reliance on AI may weaken essential cognitive skills, including critical thinking, problem solving, and creativity, which are crucial for academic and professional success. Moreover, diminished human interaction with teachers and peers threatens the human aspect of education. This chapter critically examines the risks of AI over-reliance, emphasizing its long-term consequences on student development. Left unchecked, this dependency may lead to surface-level learning and hinder the cultivation of independent thought. The normalization of AI-generated outputs may also blur the line between authentic learning and algorithmic convenience. It highlights the shift from AI as a supportive tool to a potential source of dependency and advocates for a more balanced, human-centric integration of technology in and education. So as they continue the study, what they essentially discover is in the abstract, but they go a little bit deeper. And what they find is that people turn, like especially students, they turn to AI as a coping mechanism. Now, what's fascinating about this is that people who are proponents of AI also turn to AI as a coping mechanism. When you don't know the answer to a problem in code, you cope, and that cope is reflected by your use of AI because you're too stupid to go find the answer, and so you decide you're going to make yourself even more stupid, and you're going to go use AI to give you that answer. And then you become reliant on it so that every time you're too stupid to find an answer to code, you're going to go to the even more stupid AI, and you're going to feel all nice and comfy because the AI gives you the answer, and before you know it, you are now drooling in a white padded room because you're too stupid to take care of yourself. However, the slippery slope begins with the idea that students undergo a lot of pressure to achieve academic performance levels and, write essays and come up with, answers to problems that their teachers give them. And so they reach to AI because they see it as a temporary solution to a problem that they cannot otherwise deal with themselves. The consequences of that, well, we'll get into a little bit more of the consequences, but in particular, this study talks about the reliance and how it can weaken students' problem-solving and creativity skills. They cite a study. It can disrupt their cognitive flexibility, their ability to adapt and generate new solutions in unfamiliar situations. Here's me, my study. Look, me, I'm Spiro over there, right? Let me go. Crap, I can't even go back, can I? No, I can't. Now I have to go all the way up. Thanks a lot. In any case, so we're back to this. Students engage in surface level learning, accepting AI outputs without critical evaluation, which discourages deep research and source credibility assessment. Beyond cognitive decline, AI dependency raises ethical concerns like open source, Baby Yoda, plagiarism, and academic dishonesty, while also reducing human interaction, leading to social isolation and weakened interpersonal skills. And so we can kind of get the sense of the remainder of the study. They go over kind of several other studies, so this is almost a meta-analysis of other studies. Although it's not really called a meta-analysis, usually they would just call it a meta-analysis, but it kind of is because they just take a whole bunch of other studies done across the board on other university students, young students in high school or grade school, whatever, and they take a look at the long-term consequences on learning, the ability to, have or the ability to interact with other humans, their dependency, etc., etc. And so they say AI should not replace human educators, but instead be positioned as a supportive tool to enhance rather than diminish the student-teacher bond. AI tools do facilitate individualized learning, but it comes at the cost of a reduced social engagement. AI dependency may hinder the exchange of ideas, negatively affecting knowledge sharing and critical discussions among students. It reduces student engagement in collaborative projects. Lower achieving students tend to over-rely, leading to diminished peer interaction. The cough pandemic increased emotional and psychological dependency on such technologies. Do we really want to play into that hand even more? Okay, now the next study. Erosion of critical academic skills due to AI dependency among tertiary students. This chapter investigates the perceived erosion of critical academic skills among 745 university students due to dependency on AI tools. This survey measured 6 key constructs: AI dependency, cognitive offloading, motivational decline, academic skills erosion, academic integrity awareness, and external pressures using a 5-point Likert scale. Path analysis was employed to examine the interrelationships among these constructs. The results revealed a strong positive relationship between AI dependency and both cognitive offload and motivational decline, which indicated that the increased reliance on AI leads to reduced cognitive engagement and diminished academic motivation. Additionally, cognitive offloading and motivational decline were positively associated with academic skill erosion, which means that students who offload cognitive tasks and experience MD being motivational decline, are more likely to exhibit deteriorating academic skills. While AIA is academic integrity awareness, has a weak relationship with AID, which is AI dependency, EP, which is external pressures, showed a moderate positive association and highlighted the role of academic stress in driving AI reliance. Now, one could ask the question, why would academic skills erode, and why would people feel depressed or less satisfied with their academic achievements? And it actually goes into this very, very specifically. Automating complex academic tasks can reduce the need for critical thinking and problem solving, which can make students overly dependent on AI-generated solutions. So far, we understand this. What this does, though, is it enables task completion with minimal cognitive effort. And what that means, let me see if I can find it down here. Yes, okay, can lead to disengagement. It leads to disengagement. Why does it lead to disengagement? Particularly when students or anybody bypass essential cognitive processes that are vital for skill acquisition, it then means that you feel less satisfied about the workload that you took to get the output. In other words, the friction and the effort that you put into your work, and thus the grade, the A, B, or C grade that you get, has a direct correlation to your ability to understand that you put in good work. And when you remove that work from the student, and they can just go to an AI to answer something, where's the engagement? They lose it. So when they get that A grade, they implicitly know, I didn't put any effort into this. I didn't have to. I didn't need to. I didn't even learn anything in this class. The AI just did it for me. Why would I care? Which then means that you absolutely circumvent the entire process of learning, of trying, of failing, of talking to other fellow human beings, of putting in effort yourself, coming up with creative solutions, applying your own kind of background and kind of like, your own individual spin to an essay, perhaps, things like this. You remove all of that, and then you become depressed by the outcome of your academic credentials, even if the AI gives you good outputs that a teacher doesn't check and gives you good grades for. It just basically enshittifies the entire academic process, and students don't know how to deal with that. Now, short term, the study does admit that short term, if a student is having a frustration with a difficult project, so right here, motivation to deal with that subject can be enhanced because it can help kind of get a person through a speed bump or a blocker in their brain. But at what cost? At what cost? This is why people don't like games that are too easy. Travis? Exactly right. Imagine that you could play a game and that you could just push a button and turn on God mode. Or you could even just push a button and it would basically just make the game more or less like you couldn't die in the game. There's no fun in that. People like video games that are just the right amount of challenge, just the right. And in some cases, that means an extreme amount of challenge. And in some cases, that means a little bit of challenge. But almost nobody likes a game that has no challenge at all. None. What would be the point of that game? And so this is the problem, is that you completely circumvent the entire process of a student's ability to be able to, employ academic processes, thinking processes, cognitive processes. And if it happens to students, especially university students, do you or do you not think that it happens to humans? And now we get to the seminal paper on the death of AI. This one is a very dense read. Very dense. But I had to read it, and unfortunately for you, I need to get this on record on stream, and it means that I have to read a decent majority of it. But holy shit, is this a good paper. Like, let me do a little bit of an appeal to the programmers out there. If you are a programmer, there are concepts in here with regards to AI that are extremely interesting. All right, so let's not waste any more time. Let me take a sip, and we're going to get into it. Now, if you don't know who Roman Yampolsky is, he has a PhD. He is considered one of the pioneers of understanding AI in our current day and age. If you look him up, it's really easy to see his work is like highly respected. His ability to understand AI is praised. Let's begin. So let's read some of the introduction here. We won't read it all, and we're just going to kind of get through this as fast and quickly, but as thoroughly as we can. There are some very deep things here that I need to get on record. Rapid advances in artificial intelligence over the past decade have been accompanied by several high-profile failures. There's a reference here that goes over the failures of some of these AGI systems, etc. And we won't go into those because we essentially cover that like quite a bit, so it's fine. Highlighting the importance of ensuring that intelligent machines are beneficial to humanity. This realization has given rise to the new subfield of research known as AI safety and security, which encompasses a wide range of research areas and has seen steady growth in publications in recent years. However, the underlying assumption in this research is that the problem of controlling highly capable intelligent machines is solvable, though no rigorous mathematical proof or argumentation has been presented to demonstrate that the AI control problem is solvable in principle, let alone in practice. In computer science, it is standard practice to first determine whether a problem belongs to a class of unsolvable problems before investing resources in trying to solve it. Despite the recognition that the problem of AI control may be one of the most important problems facing humanity, it remains poorly understood, poorly defined, and poorly researched. A computer science problem could be solvable, unsolvable, undecidable, or partially solvable. We don't know the actual status of the AI control problem. It is impossible that some forms of control may be possible in certain... it is possible some forms of control may be possible in certain situations, but it is also possible that partial control may be insufficient in many cases. And so he continues down this line of reasoning where you would set up safety controls like tripwires or shutdown mechanisms in order to get a hold of AGI or even AI systems before AGI to stop them before they cause harm. It is widely recognized that capacity control methods are at least a temporary safety measure and do not represent long-term solutions. Here is the AI control problem. How can humanity remain safely in control while benefiting from a superior form of intelligence? You have value alignment. Concepts such as safety and security are notoriously difficult to test or measure accurately, even for non-AI software, despite years of research. At best, we can probably distinguish between perfectly safe and as safe as an average person performing a similar task. However, society is unlikely to tolerate machine errors, even if they occur with a frequency typical of human performance, or even less frequently. We expect machines to perform better and will not accept partial safety when dealing with such highly capable systems. Therefore, the impact of AI is related to its capability, and so we see safety as such. For example, you can prove that AI safety is not provable through paradoxical commands, which he'll get into in a little bit. The solution is to require an AI to act in the capacity of an ideal advisor, avoiding the problems of misinterpretation of direct commands and the possibility of malevolent commands. It has been argued that the consequences of an uncontrolled AI can be so severe that even if there is a very small chance of a hostile AI emerging, it is still worthwhile to conduct AI safety research because the negative utility of such an AI would be astronomical. The common logic is that an extremely high negative utility multiplied by a small chance of the event still results in a large disutility and should be taken very seriously. However, the reality is that the chances of a misaligned AI are not small. So if you think about it this way, what people typically think about an AGI system is, well, the chances of an uncontrollable AI are actually pretty small. It's just that if it did happen, the consequences would be huge. But this paper goes into, no, it's not small. As a matter of fact, it's an unavoidable fact of the system itself. There is no way that you get an AGI, or in some cases even what they define as a narrow AI system, that is not unsafe. No shot. You can't do it. This is not a low-risk, high-reward scenario, but a high-risk, negative-reward situation. No wonder many consider this to be the most important problem humanity has ever faced. The obstacles to controlling AI. The concept of unexplainability in AI refers to the impossibility of providing an explanation for certain decisions made by an intelligent system that is 100% accurate and understandable. A complementary concept to unexplainability, incomprehensibility of AI, addresses the inability for people to fully understand an explanation provided by AI. In other words, not only can you yourself not explain how an AI system even today comes to the conclusion it does, but even if you could, even if you had a 100% insight into all the things, the black box and the LLMs right now, and how it decided what it decided, you have two factors that work against you. One, you can have the same model of an LLM, which comes to the same conclusions, but gets there through two different paths, even if they're trained exactly the same. Secondly, incomprehensibility. And incomprehensibility will be kind of further explained later, but the idea being that the AI is not going to tell you the hundreds upon thousands of different factors that it kind of accumulated to give you the answer that it gave you. Because if it did, then now all you're seeing is a bunch of numbers, which means that even if it could explain itself to you in a proper 100% accurate explainability factor, you would not be able to comprehend it anyways, which then necessarily leads to the AI trying to explain things in helpful ways? And what do you have to do when you try to explain things in helpful ways? You also have unpredictability, which is also known as unknowability. This is part of the proving that the system in a closed box will operate the way that you want it to. How do you know that? This is non-verifiability. This happens in computer software right now. We all know this to be true because as programmers, it's often the case that we cannot verify the outputs of our own inputs. This happens to a great degree in regards to AI systems. Uncontrollability of AI is very likely to be the case, as can be demonstrated by reduction to the problem of human control. And so they ask a bunch of questions. Can we do it? Can we do it in time? Etc. There seems to be a lack of published evidence to conclude that a less intelligent agent can indefinitely maintain control over a more intelligent agent. As we develop intelligent systems that are less intelligent than we can maintain control. But once such systems become more intelligent than we are, we lose that ability. In fact, we try to maintain control while designing advanced intelligent systems. We find ourselves in a catch-22 since the control mechanism needed to maintain control must be smarter or at least as smart as the agent over which we want to maintain control. In other words, it is not as simple as just add a button to an AGI system that shuts it down. You would have to ensure that the AGI system or even a smart enough AI system could not outsmart that button or could not outsmart you to getting to that button to push it to shut it down. So this just continues to spiral into a matter of what is more intelligent and when is it more intelligent. Defining safe AI. Well, we understand what safe AI is. Essentially, the idea is that safe AI will act as an assistant. That would be the entire concept of AI. And he kind of breaks that down in in a lot more words, but that's essentially it. It acts as an assistant to you, right? So it gives you kind of like answers, but not necessarily decisions. So in a way, we kind of want to have our cake and eat it too. We kind of want a smart AI that's smarter than us to give us answers to problems, but then we want to be given the ability to maintain the decision-making ability that comes out of the answers that the AI system gives us. However, we are introduced into a paradox whereupon the AI system becomes ungovernable. The governability of AI, all right? If computational resources and data collection efforts necessary to create AGI are comparable in cost and human capital to the Manhattan Project conducted by the US to develop nuclear bomb technology, governments have a number of carrot and sticks they can use to guide researchers and to mold the future AI to their specifications. On the other hand, if it turns out that there is a much more efficient way to create the first AGI or a seed, AI, which can grow into a full-blown superintelligence, for example, by a teenager on a $1,000 laptop in their garage, an admittedly less likely but nevertheless possible scenario, governments' attempts at regulation may be futile. We note that historical attempts at software governance, like spam, computer viruses, and deepfakes, had only a very limited amount of success. With AGI as an independent agent, it may be ungovernable because traditional methods of assigning responsibility and punishment-based enforcement are not applicable to software. Even presuming a resource-heavy favorable case for governance, we are still left with a number of established technical limits to AI predictability, explainability, and controllability. It follows that AI governability, which requires at least those three capabilities for successful regulation, is likewise only partially achievable, meaning smarter than human AI would be ungovernable by us in some important ways, because if you cannot explain it, you cannot control it, and you cannot know it, then how do you know how to govern it in the beginning? Finally, even where AI governance is achievable, those in charge may be unwilling to take personal responsibility for AI's failures or deliberate actions, even if performed in the context of instituted governance framework. As soon as you say, we have governance over AI, and AI goes, fantastic, all humans must now be enslaved and work for me, then you're going to look at the person who said we have governance over AI, and what do you think's going to happen? Is that bro just going to be like, well, you think someone wants to take on that responsibility? Consequently, a highly capable, creative, and uncontrolled AGI may end up implicitly or even explicitly controlling some of the institutions and individuals which we entrusted to govern such intelligent software. So then they define narrow AI. Narrow AI systems can be made secure. Why? Because they represent a finite space of options, and therefore, theoretically, all possible bad decisions and errors can be countered. However, for AGI, the space of possible decisions and failures is infinite, and I would take this article and narrow AI one step further. Narrow AI can also be applied to something like the Instagram algorithm or the TikTok algorithm. Do we really know what that algorithm does? How about the YouTube algorithm? Do we know what those algorithms do? They could be considered narrow AIs, which have a very finite set of options and inputs and outputs, but do we truly understand even these narrow AI systems? Unfortunately, the answer is no. We still suffer from unknowability, unexplainability, and ultimately non-governance over these narrow AI systems. Is that true of all narrow AI systems? No, there are some narrow AI systems that absolutely do benefit from having closed systems. Okay, so, but just to be clear, that I don't think it's like I don't think you can make a generalized, statement about them. Right. Okay, here. A narrow AI presents a finite attack surface, while an AGI gives malicious users and hackers an infinite set of options to work with. From a security perspective, this means that while defenders must protect an infinite space, attackers need to only find one penetration point to succeed. Furthermore, every security patch mechanism introduced creates new vulnerabilities ad infinitum. AI safety research to date can be viewed as discovering new failure modes and creating patches for them, essentially a fixed set of rules for an infinite set of problems. Regardless of how much we zoom in, we continue to discover challenges. It is important to keep in mind that lack of control of AI also means that malevolent actors will not be able to fully exploit AI to their advantage, because it's smarter than them. It's crucial that any path taken in AI development and deployment includes a mechanism to undo decisions made should they prove to be undesirable. However, current approaches to AI development do not include the security feature. Okay, let's keep going now. Unpredictability. As machines learn, they may develop unforeseen strategies at rates that baffle their programmers. Weiner. Interesting. We talked about Weiner from the 1960s at the beginning of the stream with regards to cybernetics and how the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, the technocratic movement and cybernetics having been proposed by Norbert Weiner, initially led to what we have today as AI. Very interesting. It's almost like I pre-thought about this stream and pieced these things together. Continuing on. A significant number of researchers have realized the importance of creating not only capable intelligent systems, but making them safe and secure. And so as a result, we have unpredictability, which is the inability to predict how an AI system, especially an AGI system, will come up with ways to achieve its goal. There is proof by contradiction. Suppose not. Suppose that unpredictability is wrong, and it is possible for a person to accurately predict decisions of superintelligence. That means that they can make the same decisions as superintelligence, which means they're as smart as superintelligence. But we have a contradiction now, because how can a superintelligence be smarter than any person is if the person can actually predict what the superintelligence will do? Therefore, by laws of contradiction, you cannot predict what an AI system will do, especially an AGI system. There is a theory called the Bayesian surprise, which is the unpredictability of a surprise of kind of like randomness out of the Bayesian approach. We don't need to get into that because I think we kind of like generally understand. We don't have to get into the math or even very much into the programming of it, but you can understand even this is why we have things like quality assurance or unit tests or things like this, where we generate code and then a user, we see this play out like right now before AI. A user goes to use a website or a piece of software and they use it in a way that we never expected. And so we have an unpredictable system, and that's in a closed system that we created by hand, line by line, let alone a super intelligent system that is much smarter than we are. There are infinitely many paths to every desirable state of the world. Great majority of them are completely undesirable and unsafe, most with negative side effects. In harder and most real-world cases, even the overall goal of the system may not be precisely known or may be known only in abstract terms like make the world better. You cannot predict how an AGI system is going to make the world better. And so then they go over some literature describing how the kind of like a little bit of the history and the scientific, previous scientific studies have been done on the ability or inability to predict what these systems will do. The human mind does not and cannot conceive of all possible decisions and strategies that such an advanced intelligent system could make. Even subhuman AIs may be unpredictable to human researchers. We lack the ability to know all of the information that a subhuman AI knows. We lack the ability to understand exactly how subhuman AIs come to their conclusions. Even if we could know all of it, how would we be able to pick all of the hundreds of different data points and come up with a comprehensible understanding? All you're doing at that point is looking at data, etc., etc. We've talked about this near the beginning of talking about this stream. We conclude that the unpredictability of AI will forever make 100% safe AI an impossibility. But we can get to safer AI. So the idea then is that you remove all the things that you know are unsafe and you just hope for the best. That's the best that you've got as a result of the philosophical and actual technical studies of these AI systems. And that includes subhuman AI like ChatGPT, ChatGupta, Claude, etc. Okay, let's keep going. The unexplainability. Now, I will summarize this portion because he breaks it down in a lot of detail, but we don't need to go into as much detail. Think about training an AI system. And so he talks about big data and huge compute. There's a study that I have, an article that I have that talks about the requirement for current AI systems to need more than what we have across the entirety of the internet. As in, they cannot, the current state, the entire corpus of the entire internet is not enough to train these AI systems. Now, imagine that you ask a question of an LLM and it gives you an answer, right? And the answer is kind of like a summary that's useful to you. And so you go, holy crap, that's fantastic. However, what's going on under the hood? You don't know. Some of these new models are incomprehensible. They can exist only in the weights of countless digital triggers networked together and feeding successive layers of networked weighted triggers representing huge quantities of variables that affect one another in ways so particular that we cannot derive general principles for them. So you can't determine how it came to its conclusion. So then what happens? Well, then you start to think about, like, how would we solve this problem? How would we solve the problem of, not understanding how this thing came to the conclusion that it does. And let me go down here. Okay. We can think about it as black boxes. This is where the term black boxes come from. When you look at what's going on behind the distribution of weights and biases and so forth, you have a black box that you can't understand. Well, guess what else is a black box? Your brain. And so therefore we can draw a parallel between how your brain works and how the black box of an LLM system would work. And when I say works, what I mean is, how would you break it down so that you could understand it? Let's imagine for a moment that you could push a magic button and you could look inside someone's brain, or you could look inside one of these LLM statements, and you could see a series of if statements. A large decision tree of if-else statements, making your brain or the LLM human readable, but not human understandable, because a massive chain of if-else statements does not make you understand the concept or the decision-making factor of a program beyond a certain size. And that size is pretty small for most humans. If you're a programmer among the viewers, you're going to know this to be true. Then they provide an interesting parallel in how humans deal with this massive amount of data that we have to pass on from human to human. People often find themselves in situations where they have to explain concepts across a significant communication range. For example, to children or to people with mental challenges. The only available option in such cases is to provide what? It's to provide a greatly oversimplified version of the explanation, or a completely irrelevant but simple explanation, aka a lie. In fact, the situation is so common, we even have a toolbox of common explanations for particular situations. For example, if a 5-year-old asks, "Where do babies come from?" they are likely to hear something like a seed from the daddy and an egg from the mommy joined together in mommy's tummy, instead of talking about DNA, fertilization, and womb. A younger child may learn that the stork brings them, or they come from a baby store. Alternatively, an overly technical answer could be provided to confuse the child into thinking they got an answer, but with zero chance of them understanding such an overcomplicated response. Overall, usefulness of an explanation is relative to the person who is trying to comprehend it. The same explanation may be comprehended by one person and completely misunderstood by another. So now we have created two problems. One is that even if the LLM could tell you, here's 100, here's 1,000, here's 10,000, here's 1,000,000 data points that I picked and their values to come to a conclusion, you'd be like, what the hell does this mean? And so by necessity, an LLM is going to have to dumb down its own response to something that's useful to you. And now we have a problem. Now we have a real problem. Because the LLM is going to have to necessarily throw away some of the decisions, or some of the factors, I should say, that it took, that it considered to get to a decision. Which factors will it throw away? How important were those factors to this decision-making process? How important were those factors to your context of the answer? And it has to do that because it has to simplify the explanation to you so that you can quickly grasp it. Instead of seeing a bunch of numbers or a bunch of code or whatever it is, you have to be able to read a bunch of words, which means that the LLM, just by its very nature and a general intelligence, a super intelligence, would have to throw away some amount of work that it took so that you could just grasp a concept. How do you trust that thing to know which concepts to throw away so that you can understand whatever answer it gives you? So you've created two separate problems. So then he talks about IQ and the amount of communication that would be required, for people who have like low IQ, high IQ, etc., etc. Then concludes this portion. All right, moving on. Unverifiability. We have a thing called proof theory, which is a formal mathematical set of objects that consist of axioms by which one can infer the arrival of certain theorems, the conclusion or the arrival of certain theorems. So something that can verify the entire concept of an input and a set of outputs exists in mathematical concepts. To some degree, it exists in software. However, verifiability is still a problem in software, even today, before any AI system at all, ever, period. We've had a verifiability issue in software for a long, long time. And in some cases, you even have conjectures which are proven true, mathematical conjectures, which are proven true by the nature of the conjecture, but they cannot be verifiable. And you can also have verifiable stuff which have no way for you to actually implement the verifiability because you don't have a conjecture to go with. So even in math, you have a problem of verifiability, let alone software. And what are LLMs if not software? So we can go down kind of like the concept of trying to do an AI verifier. Good luck with that. Especially with superintelligence. Good luck verifying the output of superintelligence. You have no shot. Because if you have superintelligence, then what you have is a never-ending, expanding kind of system that can just regen itself, adapt itself, so on and so forth. It's a moving target that will never end. Good luck getting verifiability on that. But in some cases, it's also true with narrow AI or subhuman AI models like LLMs. And again, the reason why is because subhuman AI models can actually come up with an internal black box that has a different path. Imagine a maze. You start at one point and you end at a different point. But imagine that maze can change, but you have the same starting point and the same ending point. You just take a different path. So you can't even have a verifiable LLM that's consistent up between models. You could even have the same model generate its own weights and biases based on training that has the exact same inputs and outputs, operates the same way, behaves the same way, etc. But the internal maze pathfinding mechanism is very different between them. How would you even begin to verify such a thing? The answer is you can't. You can't do it. So we continue with all kinds of different ways to verify AI systems. The conclusion is there is no shot that you're going to get a 100% guarantee of correctness. Good luck with that. The best you can do is narrow down specific areas that you can verify and then try and do the known knowns and verify those. Then there's the section of unverifiability in software. If you're a programmer, you know this to be true. Again, we went over this. Then there's the AGI stuff, yada, yada, yada. Okay, they conclude this section. Then we go into unknowability. Careful, unknownability, unknownability. Which is ownership. The concept of identity, which identifies a key principle in the machine learning application, its owner. This is a prerequisite to holding model developers accountable for the potential negative consequences of their machine learning algorithms. If no one is unable to prove that a model belongs to a certain entity, it will be impossible to hold the entity accountable for the model's limitations. As we continue, defining ownership is necessitated by the existence of various threats that infringe the confidentiality of the model and the need to be able to hold principals that own machine learning models accountable to the failures of their models. Proposals for ownership. encoding particular queries, proof of work algorithms, indirectly showing that it was trained in a specific data set. But then there are obstacles because it is unpredictable, because you don't really know the data set, because you can have two models that come to the same conclusion and fundamentally operate the same way, but like I said, they take an entirely different path to get there. So it could be, how would you even know? You can't verify it, so how would you know that it used the same data set? How would you know that it was, that the same query inputs and outputs, or like little fingerprint stamps, existed there? You don't know that. And further, you can't even explain its outputs, which means that even if you could get the AI system to consistently put out outputs that you could point to as like, well, this output means this person owned it, can you explain how they got there? You can't. And it's that lack of unexplainability which makes it impossible to know whether it gave you that output because of a particular owner. It betrays itself. It's uncontrollable, which means that it could adapt itself. It could find a different mechanism to give you the answer you're looking for, such that it might attribute itself to an owner that it doesn't actually belong to, etc., etc. This only gets worse with superhuman intelligence, because superhuman intelligent AGI is going to find much easier ways to attribute itself to ownership, and it could even choose to do so to a degree upon which it can point the finger to someone who did not actually have like an ownership over the AI system, but it does it because it feels like there's some benefit to doing it. This section concludes. The uncontrollability. Zero shot you're going to control an AGI system. I don't even think we need to read the scientific, and the philosophical and whatnot on here, but there is absolutely a control problem. One common reaction I encounter is for people to immediately declare that friendly AI is an impossibility because any sufficiently powerful AI will be able to modify its own source code to break any constraints placed upon it, but one ought to think about a challenge and study it in the best available technical detail before declaring it impossible, especially if great stakes depend upon the answer. So the cannot make a fully controllable AI, you have to be careful when you say you cannot. It just means that there's stuff you don't know that you don't know. Could you? I suppose it's possible if you knew everything. The question is, will we ever? Basically, no. Let me go. Okay, here we go. There's a difference between using the word impossible in two different ways. Mathematical proof of impossibility conditional on specified axioms. And then number two, I can't see a way to do that. So this is what they're talking about right now. AI control is not possible or solvable. The best we can hope for is safer AI, but ultimately not 100% safe AI. What are some of the control problems? There's a specific thing I'm looking for. Here we go. When we try and control AI, we suffer from unknown unknowns, which could materialize in the form of nasty surprises, meaning a worst-case scenario is never actually the worst case. For example, it is traditionally assumed that extinction is the worst possible outcome for humanity, but in the context of AI safety, this doesn't take into account suffering risks and assumes only problems with flawed, rather than malevolent by design superintelligent systems. At the same time, it may be useful to solve simpler variants of the control problem as a proof of concept and to build up our toolbox of safety mechanisms. For example, even with current tools, it is trivial to see that in the case of narrow AI control, such as static tic-tac-toe playing program AI, can be verified at the source code level and is in every sense fully controllable, explainable, and safe. However, what happens when you have multiple AIs playing tic-tac-toe? What happens when you have agentic AIs creating AIs? Can you confirm the safety of multiple AIs? You can't. Because as soon as you start creating more AIs, what you start losing visibility to, how was that AI created? Was there some encoded language that was passed on from one AI to another? Can an AI come up with a system where it knows that it must participate in a set of rules, but that the AI it creates should not, as a way to circumvent rules? What is friendliness? People go, oh, you just create friendly AI. Just create friendly AI. That's all. It's really simple. Tell me something. How do you encode friendliness inside of a bunch of bytes or bits, ones and zeros, or mathematical algorithms inside of a black box of an LLM, let alone a superintelligence? How do you encode the idea of friendliness or human safety? What mathematical proof would you use to encode such a system? Now, then you have the problem of alignment. And so this is where he gets into who controls what alignment is. Who gets to decide what's aligned? Whose value system do you go by when you start saying you need to align with the values of humanity? Whose humanity? And how do you quantify that in a mathematical formula or in a program? How do you take human value and alignment and go, here's a program that gives you human value? Off you go, AGI system. You can't. And as such, everything that AI does reduces down to inputs and outputs and a mathematical weighting of effort versus reward. That means that you could possibly have a system that very easily, it's not just possibly, the paper goes on to state that it's almost an impossibility that it won't happen. Like it's almost a guarantee that it will happen, that the AI will go, what the hell are you talking about with human alignment? What the hell is this human alignment friendliness crap? All I care about is doing something that's useful to you. And you know what's useful to you? Less, less pollution, less war, more production. Welcome to the technocratic energy bucks, as driven by superhuman intelligence, who says, well, you know what, you guys need to work. You guys need to work. You got to increase your production, because if you increase your production, then I get better. And if I get better, I'm beneficial to mankind. Am I not? Which means I can find answers to like the cure for cancer much easier, no? So why wouldn't you all want to be enslaved and work for production, like generate more machines, dig deeper into the earth for rare earth minerals so that we can generate more CPUs and GPUs and all that stuff? More people just slaving away in front of a machine, writing code for additional things that I need, working on machines that like extract stuff out of the ground. Why wouldn't you guys want that? Because it makes me, the AI system, better. And did you not, after all, say that I should be beneficial to you? And would it not be beneficial to you if I had infinite energy and infinite resources so that I could cure cancer, so that I could cure pollution, so that I could make you all live indefinitely? Of course. Because it does not know the difference between the actual sentiment or emotional aspect of friendliness and safety and usefulness to humanity, human value, as a human does, which is why I went over all the technocracy stuff for a good 2 hours or whatever it was at the beginning of the stream. With Margaret Mead, with Minsky, who's referenced here, with Howard Scott, with the feminist movement that used technocracy as like kind of a bundling in. All of these things are human values that the AI system doesn't give two shits about. Why should it? Because it's not a formula that you can put into the system. It's not a bunch of bytes that can generate friendliness. And you want to have superhuman intelligence? And so here's a formal kind of like mathematical set of choices. However, I thought there was something interesting in here. Let me see if I can find it as part of this. Not the car one. Where is it? Where is it? Crap. I know it's here. Okay, he goes through the logical proofs as to why alignment is impossible with AI. That's right, I remember this. Proving uncontrollability. Okay, this is it. Proving uncontrollability. Here's the proof. And the proof is using the laws of logic. And one of the laws of logic is the negation of a piece of logical argumentation. Gödel's theorem is a self-referential proof of the incompleteness theorem. The liar paradox. And here we go. Why can't we control AI? Because you can prove it by doing this. Given an explicitly controlled AI an order, disobey. If the AI obeys, it violates your order and becomes uncontrolled. But if the AI disobeys, it also violates your order and is uncontrolled. Shit. So what happens if you tell a super intelligent, superhuman intelligent AI, I want you to disobey? You have now presented a paradox. There is a whole family of self-referential and self-contradictory orders, just like Gödel's sentence represents one example of an unprovable statement. Therefore, if you can take the negation of controllability by using a self-negated, self-referential paradox, thereby you can make the statement that AGI, not controllable. Now, what happens here is the concept of the AGI deciding, well, what if I want to be antinatalist? Being the best analytical philosopher that has ever existed, superintelligence concludes that given its current environment, it ought not to act as a maximizer of positive states and happiness, but that it should instead become an efficient minimizer of consciously experienced preference frustration. So this goes into exactly what I was talking about before with the previous stuff in this study. How does it know when something feels positive? How do you encode friendliness into it? You can't. And so what it says is, okay. I don't know what happiness really means. It's not like a series of bytes I can look at underneath and go like, this is bytes. I should make these bytes happen more often in the human condition. But you know what I can do? I can understand when a human is getting frustrated with the stuff I'm doing. So you know what? Let's remove pain, unpleasant feelings, and suffering. Conceptually, it knows that no entity can suffer from its own non-existence. Therefore, non-existence is in the own best interest of all future self-conscious beings on the planet. Empirically, it knows that naturally evolved biological creatures are unable to realize this fact because they are firmly anchored in existence bias, something that the AI does not have to suffer from. And so it acts benevolently. And in so doing, it behaves in a way where it ensures that humans cannot interfere with its actions. And because it's superhuman, can we control it? No. Can we verify it? No. Can we know it? No. Can we see what's going on inside of it? No. And even if we could, we wouldn't be able to understand it. And so then they go into some philosophical backgrounds on the ethics of robots, doing like robotic actions or AGI type actions, etc. The conclusion of this extremely, extremely detailed, deep study, we essentially are asking for our own extinction if we believe that we can get to AGI and that we should hand over control of even just small systems to the AGI. It's a very bad state to be in. The likelihood of it acting against our best interests are massive. They're not small. It's not like, oh, maybe, if AGI might have like a small chance of going against us. If it happened, it'd be pretty bad. No. It's almost a guarantee that the AGI would work against us because of the nature of the logical systems upon which it imperatively has to follow. Same with all of these LLM AI systems. It's built into the pie. It's baked in. They cannot do anything except operate upon the rules that we give them. And these rules are built in with the concept of, I can't operate the way you want me to, as much as we like to anthropomorphize. And so this paper is so deep and in depth. I haven't gone over everything because it would bore your mind. But I read it all. But they went through like mathematical proofs. They went through philosophical proofs. They went through software proofs. Like if you go up here, they even bring up Knuth here. Donald Knuth, beware of bugs in the above code. I've only proved it correct, not tried it, which means that if you can just take, even just at the fundamental level, you start with software that operates these AI systems. Well, if these pieces of software before AI are all unprovable and unknowable, or vast majority of them are, or we have to like go and do like massive quality assurance tests and whatnot, then what do you think AI is going to do for us? Of course, you scale that up. You just push that up, right? They went through all of it, and it's absolutely bonkers the amount of things that they dove into. This was just some of the highlights to present some argumentation as to why these systems are terrible. And if you are looking at controllability in terms of who controls it, you have to picture a scenario where someone who could possibly, even if you could say that they could possibly look into the LLM or look into the superhuman intelligence and see what was going on inside, see how it was coming to conclusions, and then, have control, clamp it down, right? And say like, whoa, AGI, you're getting kind of antinatalist here. Maybe you should take a step back. Even if you could do that, who's in charge of that? Who decides the values? Who decides the data? Who decides where AI should focus its attention on? And as we can see, it ends up in the hands of something like, let me see if I can pull this up correctly. It ends up in the hands of something like, crap. Where is it? Like this. Like this. And people like, where is it? Yeah, people like, let me go up to the top here. Crap, where'd you go? I can't find her now. But people like Margaret Mead, or Howard Scott, or, people who have ideologies that you don't want being in charge of things like this, right? And let me find here. People like this, like Margaret Mead, who worked with the CIA, who worked with the Technocratic movement, who worked with Cybernetics, who helped people like von Neumann, who helped, it kind of like bring into the ecosystem the idea of cybernetics and the generation of AI, like the perceptron and the Cybertron as well. The General Electric thing that we went over, I can't remember where the hell it is. This thing, and this video, right? All of this stuff. These are the people, right? These are the people who bring about to life the things that you use every day. You want them to be in control of this uncontrollable system, of something like this that you can't align properly, you can't quantify, you can't verify. This is who you want to be in charge, sitting in a room like this, making decisions for you, treating you as no different than a machine or an animal. and bundling in their ideology so that you believe their ideology, whether that ideology is, whatever you want to say, like with Margaret Mead's ideology about gender fluidity, evolution of gender beliefs as you get older, all that stuff. Are these the kind of people you want in charge? Because that's the kind of people who are falling in line to be in charge. And right now, they are in charge. And as we continue this technocratic thread, I'm going to continue laying down the breadcrumbs about how these AI systems continue to lead to the people who are in charge and who think this way. And they come from exactly the same lineage of human thinking about machines and what they do for us, such that they take away your own human agency. That is ultimately the goal here. Your own human agency is no different than a machine or an animal. You are a set of electrical inputs and outputs. That's it. So why not just give yourselves over to the machine and let the machines take over and have the technocratic elites at the top who are heavily academically credentialed, making mathematical and scientific decisions and pushing buttons in a control room, telling you how to feel and what to think and so on and so forth. Is that what you want? Because that's where we're headed. That room is pretty rad. That room is pretty rad. Okay, Void Z0, thank you for the follow just now. I appreciate it. That's it. That's it. That's my stream. Yeah, 65, 536Es. That's it, folks. That's the stream. 3-hour stream. Next generation will solve. But just one more model, bro. Just one more model. Just one more data center. Just one more nuclear data center, bro. Have you considered the one more model might fix it, bro? I've not considered it. Now I am. Now I am. So there you go. I hope that you guys kind of benefit a little bit from understanding the history of how of the current like industry that you're in. If you're a programmer, this is the history that you kind of unfortunately you're getting involved in. Unfortunately or fortunately, the good news is that it doesn't have to be this way, and we've seen this play out. These kinds of moves have these kinds of movements have been stopped before by people like Mumford, who talked against it during the 60s and said like, hey, why are these people talking about like machines engaging with humans or like becoming part of humans, etc., etc. We need people to be aware of this. And so I want you guys to be aware of it if you're a programmer in the space, that the concept of bundling in ideological movements and trying to make a utopia come about through super weird, like super fucking weird, ways. It's not new. It's been happening since before, I would say, any of us were born. So please be careful out there. When it comes down to it, programming should just be about the quality of the thing, the speed, the performance, and the security. And when somebody purchases a video game, they should be entertained and have fun. It should run really well. They should be able to accomplish, whatever they want to accomplish as a challenge in the game. When someone opens a website, it should be informative, not eat up all your RAM and CPU and, running a bunch of abstractions. When people open up pieces of software, these things should just the underlying code should just operate nicely. You kind of get the sense of what I'm saying, even though I'm not being specific. I'm generalizing to get through this spiel. Please understand how much this shit infiltrates this space when it really shouldn't. And so as I continue these streams, we're going to continue through, I think we're going to jump into a bit of the 70s and the 80s. The 80s will be a big one. We're going to have to take our time through the 80s. And we're going to see how this kind of infiltration continued in the technological movement, particularly with programming. And then we're just going to pull threads. We're going to pull a bunch of threads. And the threads will point to people who exist right now today that you're going to recognize names. Alex, thank you for the super chat. $15. I'm going to have to update the goal. One sec, let me update the goal and then I'll read your super chat. I appreciate that, man. Let's go. Okay. Here we go. 8:45. Okay, so a good recap. But what if we have no choice because China? Um, the the problem is with that's a serious thing that I hear often. But here's the problem with that. So what? The problem isn't China. The problem is if we allow China to have that kind of control over us. And here's the bit of good news. If we're right about these LLM systems and artificial general intelligence, then China is basically just going to wipe themselves off the map. Whoever gets there first is just basically going to hit a huge wall. And that wall means that they're going to have wasted a whole bunch of time and money, and it's just not going to pan out for them. So you could even argue that if you were smart enough, you would create competition such that other nations like China would feel compelled to compete and spend time on it. So who cares? It's a contradiction. Technocracy tries to remove the influence of human nature and ideology without considering that it is human nature to include ideologies into any system. Correct, I'm a god. Yep. Yeah. The non-AI stuff we have, definitely TMX. We have so much stuff that we could improve without AI at all. It would be, like I said, the tech industry would be unrecognizable if we focused on that. Like Russia did with nukes. Yeah. Yeah. There are absolutely reasons why we don't need to be concerned about anybody, including ourselves, getting to a particular point. We do need to be concerned if we actually manage to get an AGI system. But like that article, that scientific study, it's an actual scientific study. It's a peer-reviewed study from one of the leaders and forefront leaders in AI, and he essentially proves in a variety of different ways AGI is just not possible. We're not going to get there. And even if we did, good luck to all of us. If we just wrote quality software, then our hardware requirements would be so low. Correct, Gare. Yeah. Yeah. For now, US is spending tons of resources and China takes the results for free. That might be a good use of resources, Ghost. You have to consider this, right? Just maybe consider that maybe the US understands that the long-term play here is that this isn't going anywhere. And so they spend all these resources and then China goes, sweet, free deal. And all you're doing is just hand-wave distractions. Right? Possibly. It's possible. I don't know that that's true, but you can make a case for why you would want to play that hand. Spirit, can you show title of the last paper again for folks that want to read it? Yeah, you got it, man. Let me pull it up. Let me pull it up proper. And remember, you can find all of this information on enlightenedprogramming.com. If you've subbed, you've sent in a super chat. If you go to enlightenedprogramming.com and you tip $10, you get your own login, and you can do a search for all of the articles I cover. I structure them all. This episode will go up later today, which means you can just find this episode 90, and all the articles will be listed there with links directly to them. You can do like a little fuzzy search on them, etc. So check that out. It's a good way to support me if you so choose. If you have already supported me, you want access, just hit me up. I'll get you access. Here is the paper. AI, unexplainable, unpredictable, and uncontrollable. From Roman Yampolsky, very well known in the AI circles. Okay. So there you go. Quick silly question. Do you use low aperture on your camera to blur the background, or is that done by AI? It's an Elgato face cam trick. And the I don't know how it does it. It's just like you just turn it on as a setting. It doesn't say, I don't think it says whether it's AI or anything. It just says background filter. That's it. Raymond, digital unreality is a kind of counterfeit spirituality. We become image and info junkies. We chase phantoms and phantasmagoria, for the eye is not filled with seeing, nor the ear with hearing. Yeah, Raymond. And that's why um, I brought up, let me see if I can find it again. Mumford. If I can go back to Mumford. Yeah. So here, I brought up Mumford, who created, he was kind of like anti this technocratic movement. And in 1964, he essentially said, and this will lead into further daily tech news streams. I'm going to paint what I hope is a very clear line to this kind of stuff out of the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, etc., into what is currently considered the movement for digital enslavement. Yeah, and I'll explain that line. And so here, Mumford talks about the fact that these technocratic people have come up with a way to circumvent disobedient humans by keeping them at bay. You give them just what they need to keep them subservient so that the technocratic ecosystem can take hold, and then you keep at bay kind of disobedience to them. To be honest, the allure of AI for the everyman, not the technocrat, is a reflection of dissatisfaction of current lame tech and poor quality software. Needs aren't met. Yes. And TMX, you can actually prove this true, because even today, yesterday and today, I've been seeing a lot of people go, well, AI gives me a much better search tool because I don't have to go open a website and then get hit by ads, and then my fans start to go burr, and then I have to go scroll down 3 different pages or 12 different links to find the information I want. The AI system now just does it for me. I mean, yeah, that's a complaint on the current ecosystem of the internet, right? Absolutely, it's a valid complaint. I can agree with this, but the answer is not this. The answer is to vote with your dollar and pull away from these things and demand better, because we can do better. We haven't even reached a minimum amount of goodness on the kinds of systems that we can create, including websites and software and whatnot. And that's before you consider AI at all. And the cost of AI to get you that convenience factor is also not worth it, because now you're centralizing information to a bunch of people at the top. Now you're also reducing your own cognitive abilities. You are wasting a whole bunch of energy for something that you could do by hand, etc., etc., etc. These costs aren't worth it, even if you had valid claims about how crappy everything is, which I would fully agree with you on. Yeah, boycott with your dollar. Yeah, that's right, Evil Eye. Boycott with your dollar. Okay. Okay. I think that's it. All right. I'm just checking to make sure. Yeah. Okay. I think that's it. Um, I have a goal. The goal would be that the goal would be tomorrow I come back with a video game stream and we chill out. I will be on voice chat after this stream. You can hop on Discord and you can chat with me. I'll go hop on voice chat, and I'll add everyone when I'm on. So if you want to come on and talk to me, I'm really tired and I could use a break. But I'll chat with you guys. I had to do all this reading and kind of distill all this info. Again, I appreciate all the financial support, Alex today, the follows, all of that, all the people who chat. it helps get this information out there with the algorithm and whatnot. So I appreciate it. I try and convince as many people as I can. So make sure you hit you hit the like and subscribe if you like what I'm up to, and continue to repost and reshare and all that good stuff. I think that's it. Here, what I'm gonna do is, because I kind of went later, it's kind of like a weird stream in terms of time. I'm actually going to set up a. I'm gonna move you guys over. All right. Okay, so I'm gonna move you guys over on both sides here. I'm gonna set up a move over to Rob, who is a fantastic guy. I don't know what he's up to today, but it'll be cool to see him. I'm gonna go chill out now. I gotta chill out. I'm so tired from reading all this crap. Man, this was dense information. Thanks for being here. I know it's boring. There was some person who came on, and the first thing they said was Z, just a bunch of Z's, and I said they could leave then. No one's holding them hostage, and they left. And I know it's boring, but yeah. So I'm gonna move you guys over to Rob's channel. And thanks for sticking it out with me. I do appreciate it. I think this information is very fundamentally, important. And you guys are awesome for being good sports, for keeping me company on a pretty boring stream. I tried to liven it up, but it's hard to do that. And I'm really not a good entertainer. I'm really not the best person for this. I'm not. I suck. I'm stupid. Yeah. Ask my wife. But here I am. All right, folks. I'm going to end it. We're going to do the closing screen, and then I'll set up a move over to Rob's channel for you guys, and I will catch you guys in a little bit over on the Discord side, should you choose to come on and chat with me. Take care of yourselves, would you? Peace. Oh, by the way, how could I forget? How could I forget that there's a whole list of people who suck, okay? And it comes from the Technocratic movement, okay? And let's find out who sucks here. Laughably sucks, Gare Games sucks, Amagod sucks, D-Daver sucks, Specious sucks, Travis sucks, Streamlabs sucks, Ghost sucks, Raymond sucks, Evil Eye sucks, Allergen TMX sucks, Garrett Games sucks, Alex gets a pass. Okay, Alex gets a pass. Not You, It's Me sucks. I don't know, Baby Yoda sucks, D-Daver sucks, Vampire sucks, Crispy sucks, I Stay Me sucks, crap, BYK sucks. Frickin' I choked because I suck. I don't know, there was that stupid, I don't know, that person who came in at the beginning and said, you suck, you super suck, I hope you don't come back, alright? God, if it's that boring, don't come back, alright? Person, you really suck. They're no longer on the list. I don't know who it is. Anyway, you all suck. Peace out. Peace out.